So if no questions or amendments, can I have a motion? Can I ask for a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Great, Cheryl.
Second.
Thank you so much, Mark. So minutes are approved and, sorry, all those in favor?
Oh,
One abstention, because I wasn't here.
Got it. Great. Thank you for that. Okay, so moving on to the next item on our agenda, we're fortunate again this evening to have Neil Howe and the team from Weston Sampson with us this evening as well. Thank you guys for joining us. And I think at this stage maybe we'll just turn it over to Neil. Can we turn it over to you?
Sure.
You can just explain what you're up to here. And
So just to recap, the presentation we made last week was focused primarily on the building itself, because we felt as though a lot of progress had been made through master planning work by Weston and Sampson in the past on the site work and landscaping portions. So we thought it would be good to kind of sink our teeth into the building itself. And so that's what we did last time we met, which was about 3 weeks ago. So tonight we'd like to start with the site work and landscaping elements. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jack Griesover from Weston and Sampson. And he'll take us through their preliminary thoughts.
Thank you, Neil. As mentioned, my name is Jack Griesover. I'm the landscape architect at Weston and Sampson. And so we're going to go through some of the schematic concepts for the site portion of Pear Park. A lot of this is derived from both the meeting that Neil had with you guys a couple weeks ago, as well as the master plan that Weston and Sampson completed with last year. So pulling those different ideas together to come up with a couple ideas here. Want to get your thoughts and feedback on some of the components that we're proposing, and go from there.
Jack, 1 second for
Yes.
the record. Could you spell your last name, please?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. It's Griesober.
Thank you, sir.
It's a tricky one.
sure I sent it.
So, as I mentioned, looking through the meeting or the presentation from last time, as well as the master plan, we came up with some different elements that we think would be appropriate for the park here, or that were expressed as a desired element. So, a lot of those include maintaining and enhancing the current views out from the beach, as well as the parking lot and the road, kind of preserving as much of that as we can. There's also some discussion of providing a buffer between the beach and the parking lot, be that some sort of wall or a sand dune, some sort of resiliency there. As mentioned, that the current parking at the park is currently adequate with the quantity, so trying to keep it in that range while still providing the enhancements that were desired. There's also some thoughts about enhancing the vegetation, greening up the site a little bit. Right now there's a lot of asphalt out there, so kind of coming up with a new landscaping theme or concept for the site, kind of unify everything there. And then one of the major pieces will be the repair and reconstruction of the boat launch. It's currently located at the northeast corner of the park. So just some considerations as we're looking through those elements. We want to balance the need to preserve and maintain the views offered at the park while still providing the enhancements and the buffers that were requested or that were expressed interest in. Storm resiliency, obviously a big factor. It's right on the water. I know the flood comes up right in the parking lot on some days, so it's something to consider as well. Because of the boat launch, we need to make sure any parking modifications we make are still maneuverable and accessible for boats and trailers. Try to prevent as many little bumper bruises as we can. Federal, state, local permitting. It's always everything here, especially with it being so close to the coast. Any design element proposed is going to have to address those. And then just generally making the beach and the building as accessible as possible while integrating all these different facilities. So what you see here is approach number 1, or kind of concept A that we came up with here. Again, kind of pulled from the master plan, some elements of that. This option has a pier over top one of the existing stone jetties, so to provide fishing or viewing access while not creating a new impediment in the waterfront there for boats to have to maneuver around. Each concept includes some tidal wetland restoration located adjacent to that other stone jetty, the little greenish-blue hatch you can see there on the top. This option includes some vegetated sand dunes that also include some trees. Currently, there are trees located on that southern, kind of the short edge of the parking lot there. So tying in with the overall landscape improvements along the street that we would propose down there, kind of carrying that theme throughout the park, making sure they're staggered far enough apart that they provide views, they don't block anything or any sights, while still providing shade and general aesthetic to the property. And this one we propose just kind of your basic concrete paths as the pedestrian access system. This would tie into the building. Details of that worked out as the building program gets finalized and the building layout would get finalized. We'd make sure everything kind of works well and integrates into that. Again, in each option, the boat launch would also be reconstructed down on the bottom of the page there. And this option does not touch the parking lot, so the stalls would remain more or less as is. One thing that we've noticed at the park is that the stalls currently are not up to the town standard size. They're a little bit narrow and I believe a little bit short as well. So if we were to do any kind of restriping or repaving, we would have to likely meet the town standard for that. So you might lose a few stalls here and there depending on how we lay that out. And then obviously making sure that the boat maneuverability is not impacted with any different parking scheme. So that'd be option one, or approach one. Approach number two here shows a little bit of a different building configuration. Again, the site would be adjusted to reflect the final building design. I remember at the last meeting that Neil gave, there was some talk of food trucks, I believe, or maybe in a previous discussion. So there would be some parking stalls potentially included at the front there, if that was something to be desired, to have food trucks come in. Rather than going with the concrete paths on this option, we proposed a boardwalk system that would be both at grade and elevated. The idea being if it's at grade at the parking lot to provide access onto it, and then as it wraps around the dunes, you can have it elevated a couple feet to kind of give a more enhanced view out from there. So it's doubles kind of as a site feature as well as just the pedestrian access path or circulation path there. Excuse me. Similar to the first concept as well, we would have the vegetated dunes, the boardwalks wrap around there. And then this one shows a slightly different parking layout with these standard stalls. So as it works out, you end up losing roughly 10 spaces or so. The final count would determine how the final parking is laid out, but that is also taking into account removing the lower driveway or maybe even relocating it to allow for some new stalls to be constructed at the southeast corner of the parking lot.
Where do you lose the parking? Is it in the center? Is it down?
It's a little bit everywhere. It's just, as I mentioned, the stalls right now I think are 8.5, and so town standard are for 9-foot width stalls. So as you go down the pattern there, you're kind of losing 6 inches on every stall, and so you just don't get quite as many per bay. So that's where most of the loss comes from. In addition to this, I remember there was some discussion about wanting to green up the site. I know curbed islands are going to be an issue with boat maneuverability. It's a lot of different obstacles for people to have to avoid. So one idea here would be to install, just to kind of break up the aesthetic of sea or blacktop, to put down pavers in some of the parking stalls. So it would kind of visually break up the view. Wouldn't necessarily green it up, but it would be an aesthetic break from the asphalt.
Does that show that on there? Where?
Yeah, it's very tough to see. I didn't quite clear out, but basically any of the stalls that are adjacent to the beach would have the pavers on it. So there's some cost impacts with that as well. It's going to be more expensive than just putting down your typical asphalt parking lot. So it's more of an aesthetic if you were looking for something to break up the, like I said, kind of that large chunk of blacktop there.
Is there a functional benefit to doing that in terms of water, stormwater runoff or stormwater management or drainage?
Yeah, so I'll explain a little bit more later. We did look into that. Those would be permeable pavers. The main problem with doing those on the beach is the sand will blind them off really fast. So it's a lot of maintenance, it's a lot of energy. It's not something we would recommend for here. Another option would be we looked at like either a grass pave or a gravel pave system. Grass pave is very hard to keep alive, especially, this is going to be a pretty exposed site here. So the maintenance on that would also be an issue. And then with the gravel pave, if you're going to the beach, I don't think you want to be walking on gravel as you get out of your car. It's not the most comfortable thing to be walking on. So we kind of narrowed it down to just the aesthetic paver option. We can look and see if there's other products out there. But as far as like a stormwater thing, the main issue is just having the sand would blind it off, and you're going to lose the benefit really quick, and it's just going to be a maintenance nightmare. With the pavers, though, we also propose in this option, just as it goes along with the food trucks, there's that picnic area in the southeast corner. So formalizing that with a sort of paver plaza on the end there. It could have a shade structure on it, some landscaping around it, nothing too tall to block any views. But that would be an option for here as well. And all that's kind of tied in with this boardwalk pedestrian path system.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
At the bottom of the screen where the green trees are going across,
Mhm.
then there's gray on this bottom side. Does that mean that what is that gray down
the
here?
long one?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the road. It's just showing
Oh,
for,
that's okay.
for clear. Yeah,
That's
it's
good.
kind
I
of
didn't know
oriented.
whether you went into,
Oh yeah, no, I'm
parking lot
sorry.
or not. Okay.
There's that little orange building at the entry. That'd be the guard
Guardhouse.
station there. Yeah, the guardhouse. And so the Pear Tree Road is right below it.
is that where that guardhouse is today?
Yes.
Or did you move it over?
No, that main island or the main apron there has remained in place.
Okay,
So that's the same location.
okay.
The
Yes.
dunes on both the plans are plus or minus 4 feet,
Mm-hmm.
you determined, but how wide would they be?
That is variable depending on kind of how many access points you want to the beach and kind of how far the spacing. We would propose them at least 25 feet apart, and then, generally speaking, probably 3 to 5 access points along each edge of the beach there. So they have different paths to go into from the parking lots. You have to walk all the way around to the one entry. So probably in like the 20, 50 foot range. It's very variable depending on. Oh yes, the length. I'm sorry.
I'm
You
talking about
the width. I'm sorry.
wondering how much of the beach
Yeah,
is.
about 10 feet or so.
About 10 feet.
10 to 15 feet, somewhere in there. It all depends on what the final height ends up being. So obviously, the taller you go, the wider you
has
gotta
to
go.
be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that kind of summarizes the second approach here. And then just for everybody's information here, this is a map highlighting the high and low water lines as identified in the survey that was completed last month or the month before. So the darker blue line there is the high water. You can see it already comes up pretty far into the parking lot. The teal line is the coastal jurisdiction limit line. So that's that one. And then the purple line delineates the difference between the VE and AE flood zone. The entire site, except for that small little corner on the north, is in the 15-foot flood elevation zone, VE. Here's just a kind of typical section of what it might look like. You can see the sand dune on there just next to the walkway. So you figure you start at 0. The edge of the parking lot currently is about 5 feet, elevation 5. So with plus or minus 4, your top of dune is going to be around 9 feet. And for reference, Pear Tree Road is at the line there, at least, is at about elevation 7. So it'd be about 2 feet higher than the road elevation currently. So you'd still be able to see clear over it from the road and most of the parking lot.
I'm sorry, say that
Oh,
again,
yes,
please.
sorry. So the Pear Tree Road there on the far right side, it's
Right.
about elevation 7 or so. And the top of dune, if we're assuming about a 4-foot height, would be elevation 9. So if you're standing on Pear Tree Road looking out, you'll be able to see right over the dunes.
If I'm parked in the car that's right there.
If you're parking the car right there,
And I'm sitting in the car.
yeah, you maybe be able to see over it. Again, depending on how, if you're in a truck, you can probably see over it. If you're in a car, depends on what the elevation is. So we're throwing 4 out there as kind of a rough number. If it's down to 2.5, 3.5, at that point you'd be able to see over it. The main issue with lowering the height of the dunes is the smaller they get, the less effective they are at providing the resiliency benefits that we would be putting them in for. So if they get too low, it's kind of defeats the purpose of putting them in at all.
Is that the only thing we can do to keep the sand back?
So we'll go over a couple other options here. So here's just some ideas of what the dune might look like. You can see on the left there, that's a dune that was just put in at Byram Park over in Greenwich. That one's a little different than what you'd have here, just because it butts up to an elevated parking lot. The one here would be more like the one on the right, where you can see the parking lot over on the far side. It ramps up to the dune and then back down onto the beach. And for the vegetation on it, we would be proposing kind of the native beach grasses, nothing too big, nothing too maintenance heavy or anything like that. So kind of keep that airy, light look to the dune.
In a, back,
Yep.
back on the picture on the right,
I'm sorry. Lagging. There we go.
what's the growth and height of
The
that?
grasses, those ones there are probably about 3 feet or so, depending on how we space them.
How tall do they grow given 5 years? I mean, will they grow higher, or do they require to be cut, snipped or something? Or?
Yeah, it depends on the species that we would select. There would be a little bit of maintenance involved, probably just keeping them trimmed back so they don't get too tall if you were concerned about the views. Also, depending on where we plant them on the dune, we can make it so that they're not quite right on the top, so that they don't, so you're 9 plus 5, now you're talking pretty tall. So if we keep them more on the sides, less on the top, then you'd be able to avoid some of that with blocking the views there.
And are they a solid row of plants? Dunes?
Yeah, when they're put in there, there's kind of a standard spacing that you do, a triangulation pattern to them. So it doesn't look like a rigid,
But if I'm in my car, can I walk between them, or is this will it be past?
Oh, you mean over the dune?
Yes.
No. The dunes would kind of mound up and then end, and there'd be pathways to access the beach in between the dunes.
So there'd be a better view of the water if you parked in front of the walkway instead of...
Oh yeah, if you park in between the dunes, or even at the ends of the dunes when they start ramping down, the 4-foot height is at their highest point. So it's a mound as you get farther down and to either end, it's going to ramp back down, and then in front of the walkways, you'll have 25, 30 feet or so with no dune for beach access that you'd be able to see straight out onto the water for.
So it'll be very similar to Weed Beach.
Yes, probably not quite as vegetated as those are, but very similar. Not as dense vegetation.
I have a question. So
Yes.
I'm guessing the vegetation, the function of the vegetation in part, aside from it being aesthetic, is to kind of hold
Yeah.
the roots, to hold the sand in place,
Yeah.
and hold everything in place ultimately.
Yeah.
So basically, you can hear from the questions, the concern is, having grasses kind of growing up high enough to block view. So are there alternatives, like low growing, spreading grasses, that would be an alternative that would function, that would provide the same kind of function of keeping all this stuff together?
We'd have to look into the different species and see what is approved by the state for use in something like that. Because I know at least on the other projects, they've been requesting that they're a native type variety that we use to plant. So we'd have to see what's on their approved list and see if there's any other.
Because there is a sensitivity to view, as you know, to
Yes.
view, right? So if there are alternatives to high grasses, as Cheryl pointed out, with wheat,
Yeah.
the grasses are a bit higher and they
Yep.
obscure the view even more than above the dunes.
Right, yeah. So we try and keep it to a minimum so the views aren't as obstructed. And then, as mentioned, in between the dunes, you have a complete open view. And from the road, you should be able to see clear over them.
The road isn't the issue. It's the
Well,
parking.
from the parking, yeah. I mean, like even farther back, like the middle of the parking lot, are you mostly concerned about the ones that are right up against the beach?
Right up against the
Okay.
beach.
Yeah. So we could look into different
Yeah.
grass options and see if there were any available.
So another question in the category, maybe really wacky question, is I know in the master plan there's a discussion of raising the parking lot, and I know we're not talking about raising the parking lot here.
Correct.
But is there a possibility of raising slightly that first rank of parking spaces so that cars that are parked in that first rank, in a way that kind of integrated into the berm system, so they're actually elevated themselves? You don't have to answer that now, but maybe that if there were a way to do that, that kind of provides the benefit of those cars being able to see over the dunes and at the same time not compromising the functional aspect of what the dunes are doing for us.
Yeah. I mean, that would certainly solve the problem. My only concern with that would be based on the kind of correspondence I've seen with the state. They are very opposed to putting any sort of fill in this area. So we have to submit the plan and see if that was something they were open to the idea of. It sounds as if, just based on their preliminary review, they're very against the idea of putting fill in the parking lot.
Got it.
So, and similarly, as an alternative to the dunes, I know in the master plan they talk about doing some sort of walls. You can see some examples here. They seem very opposed to these as well, though. It's kind of an older method of dealing with the beachfront issues there. So the dunes are the more preferable option. If this is something that the committee here is interested in, we can try to pursue it further. Just recognize it's going to be a lot more difficult to get something like this approved than it is to get something like the sand dunes approved.
Well, again, with the picture on the right, you still have a problem of getting over it.
Oh, for access, yeah, we'd still provide
But
breaks in a wall.
But I understand you'd be putting brakes in, but it kind of defeats the same purpose.
Yeah.
You
So-
still have brakes in the other one, and
Right.
it would probably, option 2, whatever it was, would look more attractive than a stone wall.
Yeah. So I guess, this one, even with the access, as I mentioned, they're just not very open to this idea. It's not something we can't pursue further, but it's not the recommended option, I suppose. Which is why it's not included on the concepts there.
Did you say that the sand dune would be 4 feet high, and how high were the plants? 3?
It depends on the
3,
variety.
4?
We'd have to see which ones were approved. You could see the ones in the pictures there, and the ones at Wheat Beach look like they're maybe about 2, 3 in that range. It just kind of depends on maintenance and species.
Well, let's put 3 or 4.
Yeah.
If you go that high, that's 8 feet high.
Mhm.
And
If you plant them at the very peak, at the highest point, which the whole dune is not 4 feet.
so you plant them, I really want to understand this. You plant them like on each side of the
Oh.
dune?
Uh-oh. Sorry, I hit the button. That just powered the projector, right? Or-
Yeah, your computer's on that.
That's on. Oh,
It
okay.
should come right back, I think.
Probably have to flip the projector back on. Or maybe not.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, just give it a second. I think it takes a minute.
Okay, we'll give it. There, I hear noises. Must be inside. Sorry.
So, like at Weed Beach, from the parking lot view, they're all the sand dunes,
Mhm.
the plantings on the sand dunes the sand dune goes like this, so they're all planted here. And then there are some at the top. And then there are some on the back side too.
Yes.
So I'm just calculating if the dune is 4 feet high, and then let's say 3 to 4 feet
Sure.
of
Yeah. You're at
plantings,
7 to 8
you've got 7 to 8 feet
at the highest.
at the highest point.
Yes.
That's quite high for the cars that come down to Pear Tree that are low to see over that. The other thing I'm noticing here is on this one, on one of them, you have a dune and a boardwalk in front of the handicapped spaces at each end of the parking lot.
On which one here?
Well, it doesn't matter, to take that one. They're all the same. The handicap parking spaces are on closest to the bathhouse. And then there's 1, 2 at the far end where the picnic grove is. And both areas you have dunes right in front of the handicap parking spaces.
Yeah. So you would provide access. The handicap access at the top end, I assume, was mostly serving for the building access. So you would, the dunes don't prevent access from that still to the building. The ones at the one at the bottom there could be access on the end to get around the dune on the bottom end there, or we could just shift the dune, 10 feet up or shrink it 10 feet and provide direct access out from there. That's all would be worked out in more preliminary
Sure, I'm
design.
not following. Your point about the dune at the handicap, what's the concern?
Well,
I know there's a real concern, I'm just trying to understand what it is.
okay, well, first off, we have a lot of elderly people that come down to Pear Tree to sit in their car and look out at the beach, have their lunch in the car. We have people that come in wheelchairs, we have people that come in walkers. So for them to sit there in the handicapped spots not be able to see into the water.
Oh, so we're still talking about the
So
kind of
the
the
view.
view being
Okay,
obscured.
The view.
Got it.
Plus getting out of their car and being able to go right to the beach. Now,
Okay.
I know of one person that's called Lori Boer about this situation. She can only walk about 3 steps. So she parks at the handicapped, gets her chair out, and walks 2 steps on the sand and puts her chair
So
down.
can let me
But-
try something. Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, I mean, this is a concern. So before we go into too much
I think we're with you. So,
design and everything, we gotta figure that out.
Yeah,
so why don't we
So
just,
we can move them,
so
push
just so we
them.
can move on, if I could just say a couple of things. One is, you'll just need to take back the issue that view is highly important to us, and
Yes.
you'll have to figure out some way to identify some vegetation that's low, that'll serve to kind of knit all the stuff together without blocking the view.
Mhm.
So that's a kind of a
Right.
takeaway. And the other is, of course, to Cheryl's point, just figure out the juxtaposition of parking, handicap parking, and, you know, berms and
Yeah.
dunes, so that it's kind of convenient for folks who may have some difficulty.
yes. The
So you'll
shapes
take
and-
that away?
Yeah, the
Okay,
shapes
so
and
we can move
sizes
on.
are very flexible.
Let's move on. Oh, I'm sorry, Martha, go ahead.
I have a question about the
Yes.
dunes. You show them,
Oh.
you know, plus or minus 25 feet spacing between them.
Yes.
You know, when we have high tides right now,
Mhm.
the sand goes onto the beach. Now, if you have those 25-foot gaps, how much are we really going to reduce the sand going onto the parking lot?
Well, it depends a lot on the length of them. I mean, you're going to get them through there. There's no kind of solution that will prevent sand from getting on in the flood. I mean,
Right.
you know, if the parking lot gets 3 to 4 inches of water, you're going to get sand in there with it. So this isn't necessarily to stop all sand from coming onto the parking lot, but it's to reduce it as much as possible while still balancing the need to maintain the views and maintain the beach access.
Would you
So-
estimate like 50% reduction, or do you hazard a guess? No.
I can't say at this
Yeah.
point. No, it's, yeah.
Okay.
But, yeah, it's a mitigation measure, not necessarily a full prevention measure.
Is this a solution that you're kind of tailoring to our need, or is it kind of a best practice solution that, you know, applies in similar situations anywhere that you would be confronted with this issue?
Well, dunes
Sand
are,
on the beach and,
yeah, I mean, dunes are it's a preferred, we suggest them in a situation like this. And then the size, shape, location, height, all of that is tailored to the site to meet the needs of your residents as well as the needs of the particular site that we're working at.
so it's kind of working within those kind of parameters, but it's a best practice that you're adjusting to the situation.
Yes, and as I mentioned, it's much preferred over the kind of older method of putting up those more hardscape walls structures.
Okay.
So it's an alternative to something like that.
You guys, go ahead.
Just a
Yes.
last question. How does the state feel about, I know they're opposed to walls. We have some curbing. If you raise the curb up another 6 inches, are they opposed to something like that?
It's something we'd have to ask them. It's not we didn't ask the question yet. So, but yeah, I mean, it's something we could ask. Any other?
Keep going.
Okay. So let's catch back up here. Talked about the dunes. We talked about the walls.
Boardwalk.
Yes. Boardwalk. There it is. All right. Yeah, so boardwalk's next. As I mentioned, the option the option 2 kind of had this boardwalk feature integrated into it, so the difference of either at grade and elevated. So here's just some example pictures, kind of what those could look like. You know, with the at grade wooden boardwalk, there's also concrete boardwalk options. Those are a little more pricey than doing the wooden boardwalk. So just something to consider when you're looking at material choice for those.
But again, the concrete blocks access from the parking lot.
They would be right. So we would have them be.
Can I finish?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
It blocks, if you're parking anywhere near that, you now have to go to a special place along the boardwalk to get into the beach areas. An opening. As opposed to getting on the one on the right, on the left, getting out of your car and just walking right across.
Oh, yes. Yeah. In these 2 pictures, this is more just to show you the materials. The design of them would be to allow access from the parking lot wherever it's kind of adjacent to it to serve as the walkway.
Right.
And then as it meanders around into the different sand dune features, it becomes elevated, and that would be where
So
the
you
only
wouldn't
break.
be proposing the rails.
No, not at the at-grade sections. That's just an example. At the higher elevation sections, you might need them. But yeah, the at-grade sections, you would have access onto the boardwalk.
Thank you.
And
But you
just the-
wouldn't have access fully along the boardwalk, where there's dunes, you don't have access.
Right, yeah, so this option would have the dunes kind of staggered, where they were away from it, the boardwalk's on the parking lot side, and that's where you access, and then where it wraps around it, it might look something like this, where you can see there'd be like the dune on the left there, it wraps around, it gives you a view out over the water. There's some opportunities for educational signage, or some historic park signage, history, something like that. The kind of structure itself can grow or shrink depending on your needs. There's some beachfronts that have kind of multi-tiered facilities with seating and walkways and that, or it can be as simple as just the walkway here that provides you access and the view. So we just need to determine how expansive the structure you would want if you were to go with something like this. So kind of recapping on the paver parking, as I mentioned, permeable pavers here would not be an option because the amount of sand that would get into them would clog the system, blind it off very quickly, be a maintenance headache. Kind of the same idea with the grass paved parking stalls. Trying to get that grass to survive is always a bit of a headache, especially in a kind of harsher condition like this we're be exposed to. So at this point, we would be recommending just the basic vehicle-loaded pavers in the parking stalls is more of an aesthetic choice to break up the asphalt. Finally, here at the boat launch, as mentioned, both options. This will be a core part of the site element here is reconstructing the boardwalk. Currently, it's not steep enough. I reviewed the plans. It looks like it's at about a 6 or 7% slope. Most jurisdictions require, or the kind of best practice is to have it between 12 and 15%. So it's almost doubling the slope on it. So we'd likely propose removing and fully reconstructing it at the proper slope so that it functions.
Do the plans include dredging?
So dredging, we'd have to look at the depth of the water there with the new kind of where it lands and how that, we'd have to take a closer look and see. It is potentially a requirement, but at this point we're not sure how much or if any is needed. Yeah, it's something we're not.
I can tell you it's a requirement because it at low tide, that's.
Is it down all the way at the?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can on a lunar low tide, you'll see the silt.
All right. Yeah, so probably need dredging in that situation.
And would that be dredging repeatedly, like every year, or if you dredge once and put it in?
That would probably depend a lot on the kind of the tide, how much sedimentation is getting in there.
I can answer that from a question as the harbor master. We've done 2 surveys during my term, and in both cases, dredging was not required by the standard of the engineer doing it, except in the area of the boat ramp. And I didn't cover that area because that's not under my jurisdiction. But the survey went from basically about 5 feet off of the current boat ramp all the way up to the Coast Guard green and red buoys. And through that whole chain, for the second time in 6 years, we do not need to dredge
So it would only be in that one spot.
in that particular area, yes.
But how far out would you have to dredge, you think? I mean, you're not going to just dredge right at the bottom of the
We need to
boat?
do, I don't know off the top of my survey, but, again, at low tide, you'd have to go, you'd probably have to dredge 20 yards from the end of the ramp, give or take.
And the current boat ramp is about 150 feet, I think. So you figure if you're doubling the slope, you're having the length. So you're about 80-ish feet at a 12 to 15% slope from, assuming you're starting at the current spot, working back. So there's that kind of gap space there that have to be dealt with as well.
But we could do this under a maintenance dredging program, right, Tom?
Yes.
Okay.
Just a question, and I'm not conversant with surveys at all, but did the survey identify the slope at all of the boat ramp?
Of the ramp?
Yeah.
I'll have to check the survey itself. It had spot elevations. I analyzed it from the as-built construction or the construction drawings of the original plans of the boat ramp.
Okay.
And kind of back check
It's
that.
funny, and I don't question your authority here at all, but we had in one of the proposals that was submitted to us, they had taken a shot of the ramp, and they were under the impression that it was about 11%. And that's slope, which fairly significant difference.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I'm just curious.
that calculation is based off of the construction documents of what it was built. It could have been built differently in the field, so I'll have to double check the survey and see if, kind of depends on when they're out there too, if they can get, where they're shooting the spot from, but we can try and work that out, see if there's a spot there. Regardless, our understanding is that it is too shallow and it needs to be increased regardless.
That's
Yes.
fine.
So,
Can I just ask then, do we,
yes.
any questions beyond just coming back with further clarity and more accuracy for these guys around the boat ramp at this stage? That sounds like we're just asking for.
I'm comfortable with it right now, what they're talking about. I mean, it needs to be, the slope needs to be much different.
Yeah.
And it needs to be dredged.
Got it.
It's just, those are the two critical issues.
And the docks that the people walk down, they'll be okay to stay?
the dock that's right next to it?
Yeah.
We'll have to look and see how the new construction impacts it. It likely would need to be reconstructed, at least shortened, relaid out to match the new boardwalk, or boat launch rather.
You think the pilings would have to be redone?
We have to look and kind of see how far out the new one would extend and how that impacts the existing deck that's there. It would be considered kind of holistically with the boat launch to see how much could stay.
So that whole thing would be one
We would treat it as
price,
kind of
one
one
view,
unit.
yeah. One.
Yeah, when we're designing, we treat it as one.
Okay.
When do we think we'll have that level of understanding, kind of based upon what these guys are asking, kind of a more accurate understanding of what this really takes in terms of the real pitch, whether the extent to which dredging is required, the extent to which the existing pier has to be adjusted?
Yeah, once we start moving more into the kind of preliminary design development kind of phase, that's when we start taking a look at that and figuring that out. We'll be looking at the same time we start looking at the rest of the site to make sure everything kind of flows together.
Do you have a sense of the timeline at this stage, or you have to go back and think about that?
Well, I think we're nearing the end of the first phase of our work.
Yeah.
The conceptual part, and once we get into that next phase where we're developing the design, I think that's when we'll really start to get,
Got it.
serious with some of the information and get more specific about things like that.
Is there any way you can find out from the state how long it would take to get the DEP and all that, the permit to do the dredging? I mean, sometimes
Cheryl, it's a maintenance dredge, so the permit is almost.
it's quick.
I don't know if you can do it that way. You need to do some more research on it.
I couldn't hear you. I'm
I
sorry.
don't think, I'm not sure it's just a simple maintenance stretch. The last time we dredged at the yacht club, it took about 8 months to get the permitting. Once we found somebody that would do it, and then determine a place to dispose of the material.
That's their concern, yes. But the disposal site is still open. The main disposal site that everybody uses around here is still open.
It's still open if the soil, if
It's
the
clean.
material is clean. And that may close because New York State doesn't want any more stuff done to the sound.
There are issues around that, yes.
But you
But in
can't-
theory, the boat ramp should be clean because they're not maintaining the bottoms of the vessel.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys good to move on?
So just kind of wrapping up here, final thoughts. As I mentioned, a lot of these proposed features are flexible, malleable. They can adjust to meet the desires and needs of the community, as well as the final building, design, and make sure that all ties together and works. So in regards to things like the dune height, the dune length, with all that is very flexible. With that in mind, any design element we would need to have reviewed and approved by the appropriate agencies for things like permits and all that. As mentioned, obviously views are very important here, so the main goal is trying to strike a balance between providing the resiliency features and the enhancements that are expressed or desired, as well as preserving as many of those views as possible. And finally, just creating a site circulation that will complement with the buildings. That's it for site.
So you guys have pretty much disregarded any idea of putting berms or anything in the middle of the parking lot?
Like the planted islands, you mean? At this point, yes, it's something we could always consider. We were under the impression that trying to maneuver boats and trailers around those is quite a hassle. And aside from that, even keeping up the maintenance on them would be somewhat of a, it's a maintenance issue as well. So at this point, we're not considering something like that. But if it turns out that the boats have no problem getting around those, we can always look into something like that.
But that would eat up real estate and cut down on the number of parking places.
Yeah, you'd lose out on some of those depending on how frequently you want them.
And maybe with different pavers, we could kind of break up the landscape so it doesn't
That was
look
the
like
thought.
a big piece of asphalt.
Yeah, and that was the thought by having the different kind of vehicle-loaded pavers on the edges there, where it kind of softens that transition from the parking lot onto the beach and work your way out.
And I think you probably said this, I've heard you say this, but the option of having some type of kind of hardy grass or something that grows in a salt beach environment as actual substitute for blacktop that cars can park on top of. Is that a non-starter? So in other words, just using something that other than blacktop that, aside from even the permeable aspect of it, but just kind of
like the
saying,
grass paved system is something we've looked into.
that isn't really affected from a maintenance perspective. In other words, sand gets on, sand gets off. It's
the sand isn't so much a concern with the grass pave. It's more just trying to get the grass to live.
no, of course. I mean, we're talking about
you're landlocking it.
Species that work in that type of
right.
environment.
So we can look and see if there's any. We haven't had much luck getting something that survives and looks good long term. I guess with those kind of systems, at least not in an environment like that.
So you'll look into it further, though.
Yeah, we can see if there is a particular grass that would be approvable by the state in that, or that they like, and that works well in this environment. It certainly is an
And we're
option.
talking about something that cars can even park on. So
Yeah.
you may stripe the sections adjacent to it, and you'll have a section that looks like it's a parking spot that cars can actually.
Yeah.
park
So
on.
the grass pave, it's kind of like a geogrid almost type thing. It comes with the plastic kind of black pots that you fill up with the sand soil mix and then the seed, and then it grows out of that. So that gives it the stabilization. It's on a structural base that allows the cars to park on it. I mean, it's always going to be a little more maintenance than asphalt, just because asphalt is pretty low maintenance as far as paving is concerned. But
So if you can just put that on your list for us.
What do you envision the border to be along Pear Tree Point Road? Where
with
now the water
vegetation
comes in?
improvements?
Well, whatever, a berm or something like that, because at the moment it floods and the sand comes in, it gets in the road.
Right.
No, we're not going to keep the water out of the road.
Yeah, so you're saying between the road and the parking lot there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were looking at doing some different vegetative improvements there. I know currently it looks like there's just some, I know you have power lines there, I believe, along that road too as well, correct? So any tree or vegetation that goes there, you're limited height-wise and obviously width-wise or something like that. So putting in some kind of a denser but lower profile buffer is something that we were considering that would help with that issue. So it looks like right now, again, there are some trees, there's some larger shrubs around there, but there isn't really a consistent scheme, for lack of a better word. So coming up with something like that would help.
There also needs to be consideration for a walkway along the front of the whole property for the people that are walking the neighborhood.
Yes, yeah. So that's something we can work into that.
I question the need for that. I mean, because the people walk the neighborhood, but the rest of the neighborhood, will have no walkway. I'm just trying to be conscious of that. But help me understand. Maybe I missed the conversation a little. Are you thinking of berms along Pear Tree Point between the parking lot?
Not necessarily a berm, just a more unified planting palette that will help alleviate some of that from getting, right now,
Because right now I know a lot of sand goes onto the street and onto the property
Right.
across the street.
so I don't know that you have quite enough room in there to get a true berm necessarily. At least nothing high enough that would really make an impact.
How about a knee wall in that type of an area as a way of preventing?
You know, I believe that part is outside of the, at least that coastal jurisdiction line. It's something we could ask the state about if they would be okay with a structure on that part of the property. It's a question we'd have to raise with them.
That brings me up to your flood and tide mapping. Could
Yeah.
you just, and I see the green line is the coastal jurisdiction limits, could you sort of explain the implications of that in terms of what can be done within that area or not be done, or what do you have to go through?
It's
Jack,
ba-
can you go to that slide?
Yeah. There's a different entity, I believe, that has to permit stuff that takes
It's the
place in
second
there.
or third slide, I think.
Yeah, we want to look at the map, with the dotted lines on it.
So, page,
Yeah, just going a little slow here, sorry.
There you go.
Alright. Yeah, so actually I have the correspondence from the state too. But basically anything in that line, it requires extra levels of permitting and review because of its location.
I'm sorry,
Information.
which line?
I'm sorry, the teal line, the light,
Flood zone limit line on the bottom?
No,
nope, the one right above that.
The greenish color.
Greenish
Oh, the
teal
greenish.
line, yeah.
So the existing bathhouse, only a corner of it falls within the jurisdiction?
Yeah, according to the survey that we've received, that's correct.
I was just wanted to understand a little bit the hard structure knee walls, those, I see there's a comment that they'd be discouraged by the state, but is that a hard no, or is that just a?
They were more opposed to it than putting fill in the parking lot.
Okay.
So that gives you an idea of the.
The answer is yes, it's a hard no.
Yeah. We were told we could submit plans with no guarantee of approval. So
And is that a function of height, or at any height, it's a hard no?
I think they just don't like the hard structure.
Got it.
We'd have to get a more kind of concrete answer on exactly why. My understanding is it's less effective than the dunes. It deflects water. It doesn't reduce energy. It's just not a good solution that they like.
One other question about the dunes.
Yes.
What role do the dunes play in terms of kind of the adjacent beach? Are they good for the beach, bad for the beach, like in terms of wave action and to your point, kind of?
Yeah, so they help dissipate the wave energy a lot more gradually than smacking up against the wall does. For reference, I was talking to Dan about this. He mentioned the storm last year that where Weed Beach, the short lane part of the property was hit pretty hard. The Weed Beach has the dunes, and so it was in a lot better condition after that storm. So it helps everything, past those as well. It really helps preserve all the actual parking lot beach area.
So we're not going to have an unintended consequence of our beach being up in Norwalk or down Stanley?
No, I don't believe so. And the thought was with the dunes also, if the boardwalk decision is chosen to move forward with, I don't have it in my slide there, but having it kind of integrated into that where it helps, becomes kind of a feature of the site, not just something that's there, so kind of, to that you could even have a sign up there that explains exactly what the dunes are doing as you kind of walk along the top there. So there's some information on it.
Have you ever seen is there any kind of hybrid system where you have almost a wall that would front the parking lot and lead up to it?
I think Short Lane has that condition with a wall and the sand comes up to it. Obviously, based on last year, it doesn't work all that well. But aside from that, I think just putting in a lot of these walls you saw there too, they're historic. So putting in any new wall structure, they're just not a big fan of. If you were to do that, you'd have to worry too about how water gets back out past the wall. So putting like a loop system or something like that.
Can we go back to the street here? Along the street, during a few years ago, or during the master plan, we had talked about putting fencing along the street. It starts over at the picnic area and it just stops.
Yes.
But we had talked, or the commission had talked about putting fencing all the way down to the gatehouse, so that it would keep the dogs from coming into the beach. But, and because there's also a parking issue there too, because it's on the curb, and people do park there when they don't
To
have beach.
access the beach?
Yes, and they
Yeah.
can come in through that gate there, you know.
Right.
But the other thing is, that you said no berms along the street. Well, that was one of the things that the neighbors were concerned about, because the sand, when it comes into the parking lot and is flooded, it goes across the street. And what we were going to try and do was keep it from doing that. So I would think that a berm there would really, or like we said, a wall of some sort if possible, would keep it back, because we're still going to have openings. You know, if we do the berms and the, you know, whatever we do, we still have to have access to get in and out of the back beach. I call it the back beach, South Beach. The water's going to go through there.
I mean, like even not into the parking lot necessarily, but just over to the side.
Well, if it comes through the walkway, it's going to come through there, and it's going to go into the parking lot.
Right. From the south end. You're saying.
Right, from the south end, yes. And then it takes the sand on a really bad, heavy storms and pushes it across the street into the people's property.
Right. So maybe I misunderstood the berm question. That were you saying, or so were you mentioning putting one on the kind of that southeast corner there, next to the fence that's currently there?
No, all the way across.
All the way across. Okay.
I mean, down by the boat, adjacent to Pear Road. Down by the boat club, there's a sitting area and all that. That's been
Right.
taken care of by plantings and things like that. But from the picnic area on the left-hand side, all the way down to the gatehouse. It's still going to go through where the gatehouse is, the water and the sand.
Right.
But I'm also thinking, I don't see any storm drainage system here. Is there a possibility to put Coltexes? I mean, we're going to redo the parking lot. So while we got it dug up, is there a possibility of doing Coltexes
Like an
under?
underwater chamber?
And and doing some kind of a drainage system that would capture the water and take it down into the ground before it goes across the street or into the parking lot, and do some kind of a drainage system right along the beach areas where it, we have one fake drain up there by the gate bathhouse now that goes no
Don't we
place.
have a situation where it's not like rainwater we're talking about? We're talking about water that's actually would probably
Saltwater.
Yeah.
likely be coming up through that stormwater system that you're describing.
It's
It'd be coming up.
It's sea level rise.
You probably
right?
have
Sea
water
level
shooting
rise.
us, spurting
Well, I
out
was
of those.
thinking as it comes over into the parking lot,
Collecting it and having it go into the.
taking it into, as it comes into the parking lot. So at that point, it's coming into the parking lot, it's not coming up.
Well, it's coming
It
in
would
because
come up when
because
it
the
gets
water level
full.
has risen, right?
If it rises, right, but if we just have like say a high tide, and it just comes over into the parking lot,
Yeah.
if we had some kind of a drainage system that
Can I-
could go into the storm drains in the street.
Can I ask
I don't
that?
know.
So, no, I think it's a great point, and I think you get the point, right?
Yeah.
And I think maybe the larger kind of, it falls into the larger category of, we're attempting to kind of ameliorate the amount of both, well, I'm not sure how much we can do with water, but certainly sand kind of washing onto the road, right?
Yes.
So off the parking lot onto the road and adjacent properties. So you're going to look at various options, including maybe some of what Cheryl's describing to you.
Yeah,
As a
we'll take a
way
look
of
and see if there's
kind of
anything we can do
minimizing-
along there that would,
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
and that would go along with kind of those, improvements that would
Yeah.
be a function of the environment.
And that's a part of what kind of we're looking to achieve here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions before we pass off the Neil? Are we good?
Turn it over to Neil.
Thank you. Thanks. That's great.
Thanks, Jack.
Okay, don't press the button again.
We trip over the curb.
I have no idea.
No?
You ready? Okay, so, 3 weeks ago, when we made a presentation to you all, we really were presenting what we call in architecture school bubble diagrams, which are just essentially little blobs of each component of the project, how they might relate to each other, what the adjacencies are, relative sizes, in a very schematic way. Just sort of organizational diagrams, really. And what we've done since then is we've taken a few of those bubble diagrams and we've developed them further with, in order to create schematic floor plans that are actually drawn to a scale. So they represent the size of, the real size or imagined size of each of the components of the project. And we've even taken a stab at things like window locations and doors and that sort of thing. So what we're about to present are a series of these schematic floor plans. And what I'm hoping to accomplish tonight is to show you those different schemes and to get your input on each of them. And I don't think there's any one particular scheme that's going to be the one that's chosen at this point. I think there are probably, more than likely, we're going to end up with elements of several of the schemes being incorporated into one final design scheme as we move forward. So, having said that,
Can I just ask you, Neil, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
so before you jump in, maybe just to set some context. So next steps, so we'll look at this, you'll share this as kind of a second round.
Yep.
And what would you like to see then, so that we can kind of bear that in mind as we kind of walk through this as kind of the next kind of steps coming out of this?
Well, I think the discussion's going to evolve tonight, and I'll hear feedback regarding the things you like and the things you don't like about each of the schemes. And it may be that we can take those elements and come back next time with one final scheme, or it may be that we have a couple different paths to take, and maybe we'll come back with a couple schemes next time. But we're going to present a series of ideas, and I think you're going to like some of them, and maybe not like others. So, just really want your feedback, and then I think moving forward, we'll also take a look at the third dimension, what it looks like in elevation view as one's looking at it. So we haven't gotten into any of that now. We're really still in the schematic floor plan stage. The next step, we'll start to incorporate massing and roof lines and what it looks like.
Got it.
So, you may remember we presented a series of sketches on how to organize the vertical circulation, because we know that the parking lot is essentially at elevation 8, and the FEMA regulation is going to require us to make all new habitable space at elevation 17, so we've got to go up 9 feet. And as you may remember, there are different ways to do that. There are stairs, there are ramps, and there was an elevator scheme, and we decided last time that we thought the elevator scheme was not practical, having an exterior elevator in terms of maintenance and how it would be used. So in this scheme, we started with a ramp that kind of pinwheels around the structure as it's rising, and then little, go back to that.
Yep.
We have staircases at each landing point along the ramp that obviously get longer in size as they go up further, and they would connect to each of the landings and then ultimately land at the top platform. one scheme, yes.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt. We have a bunch of people here who were not at our last meeting,
Yes.
and this approach is to, well, you explain what it means, relative how the existing building is going to be, might be used in the other building.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll get into that in the actual floor plan.
Okay, good.
Yeah, right now I'd just like to summarize again the circulation concepts. And the other circulation concept that we heard back that you all sort of liked was one where we actually made the ramp a feature. And in this case, it's a meandering ramp that starts at the parking lot level, lines up and actually connects to the existing gazebo, and then continues from there up to our elevated platform. So we're going to show you schemes for the building now that incorporate both of those circulation concepts. So this is our first plan. Now in this plan, the two existing components of the existing bathhouse structure are salvaged and renovated. So starting with the bathroom block, we've made minor modifications here where essentially as you come in, there's an area for both the men's and women's side where we have two changing cubicles or cabanas. So that's sort of changing areas. People can come in and leave without going back into the bathroom. And then from there, one would enter back through to, on the left side and the women's side, you've got 3 toilet compartments. One is wheelchair accessible, the other 2 are just standard size. And on the men's side, you would have 1 wheelchair accessible toilet compartment and then 2 urinals. And then sinks opposite that. So there's a stub wall that comes out that would have the 2 sinks on it. So we believe that if we're frugal and careful and we're careful in terms of the elements we choose, that we can renovate that structure for the small amount of money that is available based on the regulations. And then on the other side, we are showing, in this particular scheme, we're showing gutting the existing interior walls and putting a new series of walls in that would reconfigure the area. So in this particular case, there is sort of facing south, there's a little vestibule that leads to both the guard shack on one side and the first aid station on the other, and they're connected much in the same way that they are at the Wee Beach bathhouse. Behind that, then, there's a long leftover space that is perfect for boards and kayak storage for the lifeguards. And again, similar to what we did over at Wee Beach. And then to the west, or in the case of the slide, the top portion there would be where the police office would get relocated. And then they would have some storage behind that. Yes?
I'm not under the impression that a police office was in the charge.
It
terms
was
of- I
not,
thought they
but-
have storage, I know that.
Sure.
Well, right, it was storage, but I think there's actually an office setup, is there not?
Yes.
Well, no. I mean, they basically hang out, I think, pretty much by the Darien Boat Club.
Now, they have storage space in there now, currently.
No, I know they have
Yeah.
storage space, but they do not have an office.
Okay, well, then maybe I
Right.
misunderstood. Maybe that's not an office and it's just all storage.
I was able to speak with the Marine Police last week, and I got into, they brought me into their room to show me the room. It's approximately 8.5 by 12. They could use a little smaller space, they said.
Okay.
If it was nicely done, they would put an office in there and work more out of there. Right now, it's just storing some life jackets and a small motor and some empty gas cans that I saw. And they do have a window in there, that they would like to have a window still in whatever we do. So, so we've measured it up and that's what they came up with. on another note, I don't know where the kayak and board storage came from, because to me, that is so far away from where the kids can launch the kayaks.
Well, this would be for the lifeguards. As I understand, the
Lifeguards
lifeguards,
want kayaks and,
they have boards.
They have rescue boards.
Rescue
rescue
boards.
boards.
And a rescue kayak.
oh, the lifeguards, I was
Yeah.
thinking of the police, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, okay.
Lifeguards, yeah.
Oh, the lifeguards, okay. I was thinking of a public.
Yeah, no, that's not the public kayak area.
Right,
That-
right,
that's,
it's way down the other place.
Lifeguards.
And I guess the point here is, this is the footprint of the existing building.
That's
So
correct.
however it's sliced, I mean, ultimately, if there are adjustments, it's the
Right.
existing building. It's-
But there's no concession stand downstairs.
No, we moved that upstairs for two reasons. Number one, I don't think you want to have expensive concession equipment down and susceptible to flooding. And number two, it would bring the budget for renovations up above the allowable money that we can spend.
For that building over there.
Yes.
And we were also thinking that we may be able to call everything that's listed on their storage, even though arguably the first aid is, I mean, maybe we'll get pushback, but maybe it's, you know, everything down there is sort of storage, and
Yeah.
maybe then you're not even tied to the limitations of the assessment.
Okay.
Concession
Concession is, they're certainly gonna say that's not storage, so.
Do we want to move on to the second? next one?
Yeah, so let's go to the second floor. So here what you can see is from the parking lot, in the lower right-hand corner, there's a stair that goes directly up. And then straight ahead, you can see an entry into the component of the building that will house the program room. To the left, you see the meandering ramp that leads to the gazebo and then continues up to the upper dining deck. And then there's a third element, and that's that circular element, sort of a donut shape to the left of the building. That is an element that's just a stair. It's more of a design feature, but it's a stair that gets you from either the parking lot or from the South Beach up immediately to the concession. So the concession is placed facing the parking lot in this case for ease of bringing goods in. And then it's also easy for, beachgoers to come up from either beach, grab some food, and then either go to the dining deck or meander down to the gazebo or go back down to the beach. In the program room, that responds to the program description that we got that said that the program room should be approximately 2,000 square feet, and it should be able to be divided so that you can have two separate events going on at the same time. So in this case, each of those, what I call program rooms or meeting spaces, is about 1,000 square feet in size. And there's lots of glass on the south so that from both of those rooms one can look out to the dining deck and also look out toward the sound to the south. And also there are windows on the west. So from that program room number one, or when the partitions are put away and it's one large room, you have some beautiful views out to the west. And we chose in this case to then create an entry hall or foyer that is accessed from that stair that comes up from the parking lot. It's straight ahead. The entry into the structure is easily recognizable. And then that allows you to come out of either of the program rooms when the partition is up and gain access to the two wheelchair accessible toilet rooms, which are in that component to the right. And then there's also the catering kitchen in this case, so that when the concession is not in service in the off-season, you have a separate kitchen that caterers can use to reheat things for events. And then that one little element that's between the catering kitchen and the bathroom to the lower right-hand corner there is something that could either be storage, or it could be also small office or parks and rec in the building for events that happen at the building. So that's scheme number one. And this is
One question?
Can
yes.
we talk about this now, or do you want to?
Sure, I think Mark has a question.
yeah.
I'm missing something, and I don't understand handicapped access to the second level. Is it through the gazebo?
Yes, it's the meandering ramp that goes up
Thank you.
in this particular scheme.
Yeah.
How does that work? Does it go right through the gazebo?
Yes.
What happens if someone's like in there dining or?
Well, if somebody's in there, I don't know. I guess they go through, or maybe we can move it over to the side so that it kind of skirts it and goes around it. Yeah, that's probably that's a good point.
I had a question about this concession area. How does that compare in size to the existing concession area now?
It's a little larger than the existing. It's about the same size as the Reed Beach concession and the concession that's in the football stadium pavilion.
And that leaves plenty of room for all the equipment and that. Because I
Yes.
think the current concession stand has been deemed a little bit too small.
Yeah, that's what we thought. Yeah.
Excuse me,
Yes.
I had a question. Now, this is all elevated. How does this elevated footprint compare square footage wise to the existing structure below? Including the decking.
Yes, okay, so let's go back, Ralph, to the slide before. So you can see the dotted line
Okay.
with a series of columns that are supporting what's up above. So it's a larger footprint to both the south and the north, really. A little bit of extension cantilevered over to the west. And then a little bit to the east there, where people can wait to be picked up in the parking lot.
Is this a sort of to scale drawing?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we can figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite a bit larger. Granted,
Yes.
it's elevated, but it is significantly larger.
Correct.
And
yes.
what's
How high
happening?
would it be also?
Yeah.
The floor is elevation 17.
Right.
So that's 9 feet above the current grade.
Right.
And I think the second, floor elements are going to want to be at least have at least a 9-foot ceiling. So that means you're 18 feet to the, probably 19 feet if you had a flat roof on it.
Okay.
And then if we have a pitched roof, obviously it'll get a little bit taller.
So the area inside these dotted lines on the first floor then is all sort of like covered porch kind of?
Correct.
And then what's under there, because that's quite a bit of space, is that,
Right,
what's
so
the thought around that?
my thought was that down below the dining deck, that could be another dining deck at grade that's shaded. And the area to the right there sort of covers over some of the beach. I don't know that really would lend itself to being a good dining deck. So I think that's just going to be kind of open area.
And under that is
We-
beach?
Yeah, so we could use that for some sort of storage if we had a need for that.
I have a couple of questions and concerns. The concession stand upstairs, is that 2 doorways there going in, and that means that the counter's there like Wheat Beach? So it's inside rather than open?
No. No,
Okay.
so in this case, you can see that there are 2 windows with a work counter in front of it. That's all inside the concession area. And so where the word concession is shown, that's kind of the front of the house concession. Similar to Wheat Beach where you'd have a refrigerator there. there's a range for cooking, and then you've got some required sinks by the health department. That's a one long counter with 2 windows.
Okay, so the people would stand outside by the windows.
Correct, and that would be, I would imagine that would be a covered area, so you'd have a roof that would cover both the program rooms right over to the top of the concession. So you'd be under covered space when you're ordering your food.
Okay. Then, is that a spiral staircase going down?
Yes, and it's just one idea for a staircase, but it's been drawn to be a large enough scale so that it's not tight.
Yeah.
You know, be
Right.
generous treads.
And my last concern about this is the path through the gazebo to get upstairs, all the way over to the concession stand. There is a couple of picnic tables in there, in the gazebo. People are there almost daily, having picnics, all, you know, most
It'd be lovely.
Yeah.
spring and
Separate.
summer and everything. But this is one big ramp going down. I mean, that's a long way to get to the concession stand. But I can also see this as a skateboard area. I hate to say it, but I can see it coming. And kids coming through there. I mean, we do have the camps here, and we do have a lot of activity. I was really hoping to keep the concession stand downstairs.
Can't do that.
But you said now it's going to be cost prohibitive.
Yeah, I mean, we're limited by the 50%.
I know, we're
Yeah.
limited, I know.
Yeah.
I think that ramp there, I think we need to think of some other way, rather than connecting the two.
I mean, I kind of like the ramp.
I know, but
I like the ramp too. Maybe there just needs to be some discipline on site so the kids aren't there with a skateboard.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of winding around the gazebo.
Yeah, you raise a good
It's
point.
very
Yeah.
separate.
You want-
space.
I'd prefer
shouldn't go
that
through the
than a
middle
bunch
of
of
the
stairs wandering around
I
the building.
understand that. But on the other hand, the lifeguards are only there 6-7 weeks. Other than that, there is nobody there to
Yeah.
correct it, and
But
it's
we
a
do
li-
it
and
short
this
of-
could become a liability to the town.
But it's also built on using wood, so it's not really a skateboarding ramp. I mean, it's gonna
Is
be.
it going to be wood or
Bumpy,
is it
bumpy,
going to
bumpy,
be
bumpy.
concrete?
I would
Well, it
like
can't
to
be
point out
concrete on the
that
second floor.
whether we use the meandering ramp or not, we're gonna have some sort of ramp to connect. the
Right.
second floor.
You
So
have to.
You're gonna have 134 linear feet of
Wow.
ramp, whether it's
And
meandering or straight, so.
And do we have a visual on what that could look like? If it were a wooden ramp, that would actually help out the whole sort of skateboarding issue, right? Because you're not gonna, a concrete ramp is a lot more
Well, I
attractive.
think there are ways to put up barriers along the way after hours, you know, to sort of lock a gate or something like that to prevent people from skateboarding.
Maybe ball going out.
A lot of manpower.
Is this,
Yeah,
I don't know to what parameters totally you designed you, but is this to be a heated and air-conditioned structure, all these facilities on the top?
the program room element with catering kitchen and bathrooms and entry hall, that is designed to be year-round use.
Okay. Now, what implications does that have plumbing-wise if you have the downstairs bathrooms and they are usually drained and closed for the winter? I don't know if the plumbing is separate or,
Yeah, it would be separate in this component.
Can I ask approximately how much beach do you lose with that catering area, the kitchen?
Can't answer the question.
Yeah, Adele, can we
I'm
hold
sorry, you want me to
questions?
put myself closer?
No,
No, no,
can we just hold questions until we get to public comment?
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not public comment though, remember?
Yes, you are now.
At the moment,
You're no longer here on the
That's
committee.
not fair, but never mind.
Oh, the next.
There was a lot of talk from Pam's department about having storage space for chairs and tables and stuff
Right.
that, and then how about a space for the utilities, you know, the boiler and hot water heaters and
Yeah,
that stuff.
that stuff would all have to be worked into the program room space. Or you'd have to enlarge the pod to the right there that has the catering kitchen.
And I'm gonna make a I'm gonna make a ruling here. Adele, go ahead. I mean, as an alternate, we're kind of, respecting your status as an alternate to ask questions while we're having this conversation. So,
I'm sorry, I would have had intended to.
no, it's a, just go, please go ahead.
No, that was the question, I'm sorry.
How
I'm
much?
behind you and answer your question. Yeah, just how much or what part of the feature you're losing there with that section?
I think if I had to guess, everything to the right of that entry hall is probably about 500 square feet. Rob, why don't you put
It's
them there?
700 now.
No, but I think the beach starts from the
Oh,
edge of the kitchen.
sure,
over-
this, yeah.
Well, see, that slide kind of shows it.
It's in the water.
There it is.
Is it over the water?
So is that actually, that's hanging over the edge of the water then, right?
When it's at the high tide, yes.
So, is there a way underneath to have that sort of, the beach still be integral and usable? I mean, could be a
It's-
covered section on it.
Yeah, that's all it is. When we weren't planning to touch the beach, you would have, piers that would, or posts that would come down and support it, but they, other than the fact that they go into the ground, they don't really disturb the beach. So, this is scheme one. Going to the second design approach, what we've done here, again, we have the same sort of circulation approach with the meandering ramp that goes up to the gazebo, coupled with staircases coming up from the beach. Again, in this case, the two existing components of the bathhouse structure are reused, slightly different layout for each. In the bathroom element, we've got the changing cubbies up on top there on each side, and then you have the toilets and urinals beyond that, closer to the parking lot, and the sinks on the exterior walls. We have purposely left sinks out of the women's room, just to make it tough on the women of Darien. I just noticed that, sorry about that. And then the pass-through between the buildings, we actually have taken a little of the space away from the area that will house the police, the guard shack, and the first aid. And we've created a series of outdoor showers there. So that's in the pass-through between. And then we've added a storage component to the right there.
Isn't that new?
That would be new. Yeah, but it's storage only, so we don't have to conform to the FEMA regulation. And then up on the second floor, we have swapped the concession and the program room. We moved the program room front and center toward the parking lot. The concession is further back, and we've wrapped the dining deck kind of around the concession and given a much larger space between the concession and the program room for dining. In the case where there's an event in the program room that the weather's nice, that event could spill out onto the deck. So the deck really engages the room a little bit more than it did in the first scheme. In this case, the program room is just a single room. It's only about 1,400 square feet, so it's about 2/3 the size of the room in the previous scheme. And in this case, we've got the two wheelchair accessible toilet rooms to the right there, and then some storage closets across from them, and then a large storage room to the right of that. And then just north of the toilet rooms is the catering kitchen. And you see stair comes up from the beach along the west up to the deck, and then a stair comes up from the parking lot in Southern Beach on the other side.
And
Yeah.
what's the upper deck footprint of this one relative to the other one? It's smaller, right?
Yes. So if we go back to, Rob, go back to the first, please. Yeah, so there's, I'm at the,
Oh, sorry, no.
the first floor of the second design approach. That one, yeah. There's still some covered area. It's just, the reality of the situation is that the second floor, square footage of the second floor program elements is larger than the existing buildings downstairs that we're renovating. So we have to have a larger footprint above than we do down below. And so the question then is, how do we detail that in such a way that it doesn't seem dark and foreboding, but it seems more like a covered porch? If you remember the Weed Beach Pavilion, the entire pavilion is wrapped with a covered porch.
In this scenario, do you lose a bit more of the beach because you have the storage downstairs and upstairs?
Well, so this is what it looks like in the site. It pulls the whole footprint further back from the mean high water line. So I don't know that you're really losing much usable beach at that point. And it does give you this storage component on the first floor. Now, Rob, you go back to the first floor again. So we don't have to put that storage component that you see in the lower right-hand corner there. But we chose to do so because we didn't want to have so much covered area right next to the beach and the parking lot, and we thought that you could use the storage. So.
How big is that storage area? Do you have any idea? Oh, it's 730 square feet, sorry.
On the second floor.
That's upstairs.
Yeah.
That's inclusive of the catering kitchen and
Oh, okay.
bathrooms as well. Then,
So I'd say it's about half that, maybe 350 or 360 square feet.
Right. Can I go back to the downstairs for a second? The showers here, what is the flooring in there going to be?
Well, we're still in a very schematic design stage at this point, so I don't know that it could be concrete. It could be concrete with some sort of
Drainage.
yeah, drainage and something you step up on that's sort of like a grill. It's
Down in Byram.
it's got to be drained.
Right.
Yeah.
Down in Byram, you have these, they're like concrete pillars almost, and they have a shower head up here and they have a foot spray down here.
Yes. Right.
And you have a foot spray over at Weed, which is everybody's dream to have a foot spray over here at Pear Tree.
Okay.
So is that type?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing we were thinking about there. And I don't know that you really need 4 of them, maybe you don't really, you can just get rid of 2 of them. But it seemed like a good area in this particular scheme to locate them, because it's accessible from both beaches, and it's on the way to the parking lot.
Right. And around this, because the dotted lines are the upstairs overhead,
Yes.
but so I'd like to know what within the dotted lines, what would be the surface that people would be walking on? Would that be just sand all in there?
I think some of it has to be a hard surface.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it could be sand, yes. Once again, as we start to develop these schemes a little bit further, I think we will take a look at whether that should be a downstairs dining deck that's covered. So you have, you have a dining deck that's up on the second floor that's open to the sun, and then one below that that's in shade.
Oh, that whole area on the second floor wouldn't be covered by a roof area?
No, that's wide open.
So what would the roof line look like for the concession stand and the program
Yeah,
room?
you have separate roof lines for
So
both
it'd
of
be
them.
two separate roof lines that would still be up there about 19 feet.
Yeah, in this scheme, yeah.
And the concession stand, it's larger here, right?
I think it's about the same.
That one's a little small than the first one.
The other thing to keep in mind is that the committee, we were talking about whether or not the concession stand will stay. And whether or not we remove that, and then like you said, Cheryl, it's hard to access because of the ramp, but we could have a variety of different vehicles that provide food, and then that's at the lower level.
Right,
So that's something to really think about as well.
Yeah, so in our
Just any
schemes
options.
that we're presenting tonight, we have not considered the food truck option.
Oh, okay, well, that's option.
We've designed to the building program that you gave us. But, that's something that we brought up in our presentation 3 weeks ago, that we think that's a good alternative to having a concession. Okay, so then, with this third approach, what we've done is we've done away with the gazebo entirely, and we've created a dining deck in its place. Okay, so back to the first two.
Let's listen.
So in this case, this one was sort of driven by our desire to look at that that first circulation scheme we showed you when I started my presentation, where the ramp starts and it kind of pinwheels around. In this case, it would pinwheel around the dining deck. So it would start in the lower leg there to the right, go up to a landing. There you go, up to a landing there, which is also accessed, that landing's accessed from the steps from the beach. Then it would go up to a second landing, and at that point, you could actually go to the left and walk out to the pier. So that, gives you good access to the pier. Or you turn right and head up further to a higher landing, and then turn right and go up to the platform elevation that all the functions would be located on. So that area that's wrapped by the pinwheeled ramp is a dining deck. It's out there in the open, basically in the area that the gazebo was. Now I suppose we could cover it, and in that case it would be a larger gazebo, which is something we could look at. And then, so going back to the existing structure, once again, that we've renovated, the bathroom block and the office guard shack, first aid block, are similar to what we showed you in the last scheme.
Yeah.
And in this case, we also provided, we thought we'd suggest that maybe we could store kayaks and underneath a portion of the upstairs, and then have a bike rack also underneath that. So for people who want to ride bikes in the beach. Do you get many bike riders?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we would get more.
Yeah. So that's that, and then we've also provided, in this case, a kayak launch area between the two piers, between the two jetties. So it's It's an area that is not currently a swimming area, and it's protected by the 2 jetties, and we just thought that could be a fun place to jettison the kayaks.
I'm not clear on where that would, where is that going out?
So that's up there.
All right,
And then, in this scheme, we've also looked at maybe putting a decking surface on both of the jetties, so you'd be able to walk out on each jetty to the end.
Actually, I think could be particularly nice on the jetty that's not currently programmed as a walking surface, because they're gonna do the grass restoration area there. It could be kind of cool to be out there, and you know, you have the restored wetland right next to you.
So
I guess we'll get into the complexities of working around these jetties, I guess, or something.
Yeah. Yes. There are different ways to do it.
Yeah. The Tokenique Club has a nice, very similar large stone jetty that has a really nice walkway. Yeah.
To walk on top of it.
Yeah. I think they take it down every season actually, so it must be pretty modular.
I thought the commission took the pier out for the front beach. It was out of the plan to do on this, to do
No, they had
The fishing-
pier, they kept
the fishing pier.
Yeah, we're not including a separate fishing pier, nor did.
Well, there's a pier out here,
Jack.
there's a pier out to the left, and a
Right.
pier to the right.
Both of those are
Those are
existing
the existing
jetties.
stone
Those are
jetties.
the
Oh, those are the
existing
existing,
jetties.
so,
Yes.
oh, I thought you meant covering over and making a walkway out to both of them.
Yeah, we are. We're talking about putting a walkway on top of the existing jetty, so we're not building anything new out into the water,
Oh,
but we're
okay.
creating a walkable surface on top of the jetties.
Well, when this was discussed before, the one on the, that goes out towards the front beach, that's the swim area there, and the commission at that time, I thought they had removed that one and wanted to put the fishing pier over the back
Yeah, if
To
if
the
I can try
right.
to interpret here, I think.
because it's a swim area, and if people are gonna go out there
Sure.
with fishing poles.
If I can try to interpret, I think what Neil is proposing here is, first off, you're right, the commission was concerned about the idea of, you know, throwing hooks into the water and potentially landing on some young child that's fishing. So the idea was if there was going to be a fishing pier, it was going to be on the south side, the southmost side.
Right.
And so I think if we were to, I guess, just to kind of interject here, I guess if we were to take Neil up on his suggestion of putting a boardwalk on that other jetty, we'd have to just make sure that people understand and have to have signage, and there's no fishing off of that jetty, it would just be for walking, it would be a boardwalk. But I think these are basically existing jetties that are simply now covered with a boardwalk so that they're
Right.
usable, as opposed to potentially somebody attempting to walk out
I
of the
think the
existing
back
jetties
one
and
is
falling.
great, because
It's
that's
safer.
where the kids could fish and do everything, but I'm really, there's really it's very difficult to get people to stay off the rocks now, let alone to keep them from fishing if there's I mean, if it's there, we're gonna use it.
Well,
To me,
we'll have to
it
figure
would
that
be
out.
really pretty, it would be nice to be able to walk out there. I agree, but I don't know how we're gonna keep kids from fishing out there. And as far as.
Let alone skateboarding.
Yeah, and as far as the gazebo goes, that's a landmark, and I think it's in the historical records, so I don't think it can come down, but I think we'd have to find out about that.
Good too. Or, I think to your point, it could be rebuilt, right? I mean, with the same materials and.
It could be rebuilt, it could be larger, or it could be incorporated into the scheme. So we don't take it down.
Because you could still go around it,
Yeah. Yeah, the dining deck just goes out to it. So, you know, there are.
Not to disparage the gazebo, I actually grew up in Darien and I have had this sort of nostalgia for it. And then going back and really looking at it, I was like, this is as nice as I remembered it. So I think if the opportunity is there to recreate it in a way that's, you know,
more
better.
usable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think this kind of last scheme, and we'll certainly open up the floor for everybody to weigh in here. This last scheme, I think one interesting aspect of it is it's integrating a lot of elements now. And today, we've got elements that are kind of disparate, they're separated, they're not integrated. So not only integrating where the gazebo is with the dining deck and the buildings, but also now allowing people to walk out, kind of get over the water. So I think it's kind of something that's interesting to think about.
So on the second floor of this third scheme, once again, we've divided the program into 2 blocks. One of them is sort of the program room, which has a catering kitchen and some storage and the 2 bathrooms. And then we've got the concession on the other side, and with a stair that comes up from the beach to a nice dining deck between them, and then over from there to the other dining deck, the extended dining deck. So there's a lot of dining deck in this scheme.
So that goes straight across there.
Correct. And you can see, if you follow the arrows, you can see how the ramp goes down from the highest point of the platform, and how it winds around the dining deck, extended, and down to grade.
And so of course you can walk under at this point, out to the sort of second pier.
Yeah. And so now if you look at the site plan, you can see what that's looking like. So I think that does it.
I guess, Neil, in this scheme, I feel like you're giving away a lot of view, panoramic stuff to the concession stand,
I agree.
as opposed to
Yeah.
and during the particularly during the off season when that space might be used for events.
Yep.
I think the idea you had way back in Scheme A, where it's facing south, and you get the view of the harbor, something like Hallam, in my case.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, the last 2 schemes,
The concessionaire doesn't need to be looking out in the harbor.
last 2 schemes were driven by the, trying to get the big mass closer to the parking lot, and then leave a lot of space for outdoor dining or gathering between the elements. The first scheme was a little bit more compact, and I think the building components probably are better in that one, in the sense that from the multi-purpose room, you get great views out to the south and to the west. And it's also sized to the requirements that we were given. The last 2 schemes, the multi-purpose space got smaller and smaller in each scheme, so. So there's, as you see here, there's not as much upper level deck, and maybe you don't need as much. I think this one functions very well in the off-season, from November through April. And then in the warmer months where you might want to spend more time outdoors, maybe the last 2 schemes are a little better. And again, as I said at the beginning, maybe there are elements of each of these schemes that you like that we can try and incorporate into a final scheme.
If you could still take that program room here that you have 2 rooms and make it smaller and put a little more space around the concession, you can configure it this way.
Yes.
So you have some dining there.
Yes. Yep.
Neil, would you like to have us open this up to the community? Get
Yeah,
someone-
sure. The committee, the public, whoever.
Well, we'll get to the public in a minute. But, any feedback, any observations, thoughts?
Head is spinning a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
same here.
I mean, I think components of each might make the puzzle. I'm very excited about it. My first reaction is I don't know if we need 2 program rooms. And,
Well, that's one large one that had
Yeah. But,
a wall.
you know, I like it, the concept of C with, one program room and a larger concession stand and whatnot. But I think we have a lot of discussion to go through.
Yeah.
Can I just add something too, Tom, to that comment, is that when Jim Coughlin and I talked about the department's needs, we talked about the current space at the Paddle Hut, which is 974 square feet, which is small. You know, when we have parties that are trying to get in there, that's where our needs were like, well, maybe if it was double the size there with some storage, is really what we talked about.
If I can jump in for a second, I think that's one of the things, Mike, you asked me at the beginning what you can give us as feedback, either tonight or over the next couple of weeks. I think that's one of the things I think that we'd really like you to look at is the program elements, the sizes, and whether we have enough, whether we don't have enough in terms of square footage and program elements. We'd like to get all that back so we can really hone in on what the building program is.
Mark?
Like Tom, I mean, this is all, it's very interesting, and it's, I'm a little negative on approach A because it's got foundation for the second level out in the water. And I'll leave that to experts.
I think that's something we can fix just by pulling that forward, so I think we can fix it.
Yeah.
I think, some very creative thoughts here. I'll be perfectly honest though, my one concern is in all of these, unless I've miscalculated, it looks like we've got elevated structures that are 4,000 square feet plus, that are up 9 feet and then up another 9 plus then allowance for roof. And while I think, they're attractive structures, I think on this small beach, I'm afraid that this is going to be a very, very looming structure. And I think the flexible space is driving this. I, for one, would like to see a conceptual design utilizing the existing buildings to see how you could enhance their appearance and developing dining space around the existing grade level structure. I guess without flexible space, the justification for flexible space is not clear to me. I don't know what it's going to be used for, who's going to rent it? Is it open to the public? Do you have to have a key to get in? Is it going to require somebody to maintain this? We're going to have to heat it and air condition it. There are a lot of questions in my mind about flexible space, and then again about the size of an elevated structure. I think we've done a very nice job with it, but I'm a little concerned it's looming. It's a small beach and it's a very low-key beach, and that's what it's always been, and I think it's kind of transforming the nature of the beach.
Flexible space is one of the charges from the commission.
I know, but what is it going to be used for? Just because they say flexible space.
Well, we certainly could brainstorm, but when you're talking about programming or event planning of anything, the benefits are endless. So we certainly can put lists together things.
I think it may be helpful.
You were going to have to go to the RTM, and this flexible space is going to drive the cost of this a lot.
Well, it sounds like
You've
even
got to have a good justification in my mind
Sure.
of why this
That's
is
a great
needed. Like,
point.
are you turning people away at Wheat Beach at this point?
Well, I would just say maybe even going back to Neil's question a moment ago, I think, as much clarity as we can provide Neil, the better for him to kind of help us. So I think maybe, if you're okay with it, maybe you can come back, at the next meeting, with, your thoughts on examples of some of the program activities that would take place, and that could guide. I think that'd probably be helpful to you, right?
Yes.
Kind of help you understand. And maybe even frequency. you know, what you're thinking,
Sure.
types and frequency of events, you know, through the year as well. I think that would just be kind of helpful. Because it's come up as a question, you know,
Sure.
frequently,
That's-
so I
that's
think.
possible, absolutely.
And I also think we ought to clarify whether we really need this police office, because
Mhm.
that is taking up some extra space
Right.
that could be used.
We did talk to the police department though,
Yeah.
they definitely want it.
Yeah, but could we change the size?
Right,
Right.
I mean, if you walked in there and they've got a couple of cans and
right.
gas cans and whatever, do they really need the whatever square footage that they currently
Well,
have?
they would probably could have use it more for an office and not use them.
But do they even need it?
No, it's to- they need to be- They need to be at the boat club
Yeah.
if they're on duty and if they have to do a run.
Yeah.
That's
They
what
can't be
both
running
is.
around the parking
Right.
lot, across the
Absolutely.
parking lot.
Right,
So,
so it had to be strictly storage.
Okay, so we'll get some clarity on that.
Yeah, sure. Do you
I
wanna-
think you're making, you know, I would say, Martha, I think the point you're making about kind of the profile of this beach is different from Whedon, kind of this being a bit more of an intimate, kind of lower key space, and I mean, we don't really understand what this is going to look like until we start to see elevations and kind of get a view, so I think it's a good point you're making. It's relevant. I'm with you. Cheryl?
Well,
Okay, Diana?
last week, at our last meeting, we had a bunch of different designs. And now you've come up with just a couple here, and most of them have this ramp going through the gazebo, which personally I'm not a fan of. But on one of the designs last week, or last meeting, you had one that had the first aid lifeguard storage, police, and concession on the first floor, and then you had a covered area going out over the parking lot, and it was underneath for food trucks. It was approach 2. And then on top of that area was the roof deck and the multi-purpose area. I would have liked to have seen a better sketch of this one, and because I think, I agree with Martha, this is huge. I mean, this is just going to be up there, and I know we have to at some point think about going up, but I'm very concerned. I know, maybe I need a cost analysis on some of this stuff to figure out whether this is even feasible, but I think that I like the bathrooms downstairs, I like the shower areas downstairs. If there was some way of maybe waterproofing this building to keep like people do for their basements, that way maybe the water would stay out of there. I don't know if that's feasible, I'm not.
It's not feasible. We went through all this at
You probably did, yeah.
this winter. We discussed that whole thing, and it's not feasible. We can't afford it, given the money. You gotta go up if you want, so.
If you want new, I mean, you can knock out holes
You
so the
could
water
just,
flows
leave
through.
the bathrooms, you
Yeah.
could just leave the bathrooms downstairs.
Right.
You really do storage in the old building and do nothing else. That's what you want to do. But I don't think that's what the town wants, and I don't think that's what the Park and Recs Commission's charter wants.
Well, I know we have a charge. I mean, I'm not trying to deviate from all of that, but I'm
Well,
trying to
you are.
figure out, well, not really. I'm trying to figure out how to keep it at, like Martha said, it's a small little beach, and we're trying to, it's like trying to put a square peg in a round hole to make it all fit with FEMA regulations. And I know that's going to be difficult to go around, but I'm just trying to be, the community has said that they, the berms were an issue and the boardwalk's an issue and the beach is small in the back and we have a little concession stand over here. Another thought I had was,
Can I just, before you move on to the other thought, I just want to capture your initial thoughts, and I just want to remind us that a lot of this, maybe the real kind of, the heart of this is providing an enhanced set of amenities for the community to really enhance the community's ability to enjoy this beach.
Right.
We have two beautiful beaches, so, you know, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact, and I think that should be kind of our North Star here, to understand how we can really enhance the experience of the community. You know there's a population in the community that are members of clubs, that don't have the ability to kind of experience getting out close to the water or on the water in the way that, you know, others of our neighbors do. And I think the core objective of the commission, if I can understand what the commission's kind of goal has been, is to kind of, you know, create a set of conditions to really unlock, you know, the beauty and, you know, the experience of being out on the Sound for the larger community.
Well,
So, and I think, you know, I'm not suggesting any one of these has to be the answer to that, but the notion of providing dining decks, providing the ability to kind of
Right.
walk out on the jetties, you know, providing the ability to sit outside and eat outside in a way that doesn't exist today on that beach. I think those are wonderful things, and if we could find a way to accomplish those types of things, I think that's what the commission has asked us for, and I think that's what we're being kind of, I think, charged with. So I would just remind us, it's not just simply about what, you know, FEMA's limitation, you know, the limitations that FEMA's placing on us. I think we've been guided by Diana also, not to be limited by the, you know, concern at the moment about, we haven't been given a budget. I mean, we're mindful. I think we're kind of responsible here, so I don't think any of us, and to your point, you've reminded us, we're going to have to go before the RTN, and at some point we're going to have to justify all of this. But I think the heart of the justification has to be creating, kind of, you know, enhancing, you know, the experience that the community has when they go to our two beaches. These are wonderful amenities, and I think that's what's guiding certainly my view of what we've been asked to do here.
Well, I agree with you on a lot of that, Mike. I think that, yes, we want to make a nice building here that's functional.
No, I'm not saying make a nice building, don't get me wrong.
Art and deck and everything. I agree with nice dining. I think that we could have an upstairs dining area of some sort that would overlook the water. I love the piers of, you know, being able to use that part of the beach that's unusable now, the rock jetties. I agree with all that. I just think that a lot of this is huge.
Right, so I guess what I would ask then,
So-
you know, as we provide feedback to Neil is, if you guys accept that that's what I just described as at least one aspect, one dimension of what we're trying to do here, then I think we should share with Neil our thoughts on, you know, what we can do to satisfy, you know, that goal, kind of enhancing, recognizing that this beach has a special profile, it has a special character, it's a bit more of an intimate place. But once again, if the goal is to enhance the experience of folks who are going to the beach, so how do we do that? So is the idea of having a raised dining deck, does it satisfy that? And if so, we'll tell that, you give that information to Neil, and, you know, within the confines of, you know, we don't want to have a deck that covers the entire beach. But I think we've got to figure out now as a committee, I think here's what I see as a little bit of challenge for us. Neil's presented us with, I think, at least even at this early stage, some very, very creative and I think really relevant options. I think we as a committee now have to figure out, okay, so what do we do with this stuff?
Well,
And if we're just, and I think we could get bogged down if we're worrying about kind of specific details. I think we should, at this stage, we might want to still stay kind of at a bit more of a conceptual level and talk about, to Martha's point, the size, intimacy, and you know, Neil is a professional, so I think if we kind of provide that level of direction to Neil, and you can correct me, I think you'll know what to do with that. If we tell you, hey, look, we don't want to have something that's too dramatic here, that's too oversized, that's too overpowering, I think we can trust Neil to come back to us and kind of rework this here. I think if we're talking about specific sizes of things, like, you know, I think you guys get my point here. I guess what I'm asking you guys, maybe I'm not. Let me rephrase it. I'm asking you guys for your help to figure out, okay, how do we take the information now that we have and bring it to the next level,
Okay,
and provide the level of direction that I think Neil is looking to for
okay,
to
so
us for.
this is a lot to absorb. We had a lot from last meeting, we have a lot tonight to absorb. There's a lot of things that, you know, I read in here before, after the meeting and stuff. So are you asking us to go through this all tonight, or can we take this all home and go through it, and then at our next meeting, discuss it come back with our
Yes.
I
thoughts
think
and our.
that's the way to go, yeah.
I think,
We've thrown a lot at you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think you need time to digest it. The other thing that I want to say is that in our office, we put a lot of emphasis on the scale of the buildings we design. So we like to keep the scale manageable, particularly in a situation like this. So I wouldn't worry too much right now about how high it is or how big it is. I would focus more on the program elements and whether, whether they're needed and wanted and whether the sizes are right. And then with that feedback, I think we can then, we'll give you something that is not going to be too overbearing in terms of scale.
Okay.
By the way, we don't have a fixed plan for how to, I think we're in a little bit of uncharted territory here, right? So to your question, I'm not asking the committee anything at this stage. I'm with you guys. I'm kind of absorbing all of what we're being shared with us. And I think what I'm trying to tease out from, with Neil's help and the discussion with the committee is, what do we feel is the appropriate next steps? And, Cheryl had reached out to me, since the between meetings and raised this question. So I think, that's a question that we've got to kind of sort through here. I think to the extent we can provide some feedback now that we think might be definitive, I think that's great. So I'll just give an example. If we don't like the idea of this ramp cutting through the gazebo, and we feel like, hey, look, we're in agreement with that, I think that's information that's important to Neil. He can take that back and check that off the list. If there are some other elements that we feel strongly about, I think we should kind of try to whittle this down, kind of spiraling, to use that term like it's an educational term, right? You just keep spiraling in until you get to the center here. I think the more of that we can do, I think the better. But I'm not looking to kind of force an answer. The only timeline I think that's relevant to us is we want to be in a position where I think as we go through the approval process and the budgeting process, we're kind of prepared for that so we don't miss a year, I guess. But I'm not even sure. I think we still need to nail that down to be a bit more precise around it. Otherwise, I don't have any, I'm not setting particular conditions. I don't know, Randy, how do you feel about it?
No, I think we gotta digest what we have here, and Neil will give us a little more feedback and maybe some conceptual ideas of what kind of mass you might have in that space. You have to realize historically there was a much bigger building there. There were all kinds of bathhouses all over that piece of property.
But they were not.
Oh, they were in a row, actually. By the way, just go look at the Park and Rec website. I did a visit to the Darien Historical Society, and it might be, for those who are interested, it's kind of an interesting set some context.
So should we continue to do
Yeah,
that?
Diana?
So I liked elements of all of them, but I want to take them apart. So on the third scheme, where the thing seems, it looked to me like it covered the whole space, and that was a concern. I actually like the meandering ramp with the caveat that it go around the dining area. I also really love the concept of maximizing on that upper deck the view of the water, either for, and I think it's going to be one of those things that we're going to have to struggle with. Do you maximize that view for this program room, or do you maximize it for the dining deck? But positioning it so that the maximum amount of people can get the maximum pleasure out of that, what is found to be an absolutely spectacular vista, is, in my mind, key. So from that perspective, I kind of don't like this great big double program room, because I think it removes some of that great dining deck and restricts all the great view to a program room that might not be used all the time. Those were sort of my key takeaways, is we should really be trying to maximize the downstairs with the bathhouses, and that all seemed pretty, well done. The other thing that I would really want you to think about is really minimizing the loss of beach, because I think that the beach is something, it's not very big there to begin with, and we want to keep as much of the beach as we possibly can. So some of these scenarios, I think we lose a little more beach than in others, so, thinking about that a little bit. Those were my sort of key ones. And this, I had a question in B, where you have the program room that's situated over the parking lot. From the front of that room, you're still getting great views of the water, right? I'm assuming that's, yeah. So, that I kind of did, even though the concession area is overlooking the water, it does look as if you have a lot of dining space that also overlooks the water, and the program also overlooks the water. So, I don't know, just maximizing the view would be, for everybody that's going to use the space, would be a key goal, I think.
Okay.
Just for my-
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one thing to consider is, again, whether you need the concession stand.
Yeah.
If you're willing to go to the food trucks concept, then you can certainly shrink the upstairs footprint.
Have any other,
Food trucks is not that
munis-
reliable.
have any other municipalities with beaches used, are they using food trucks now?
Oh, yeah.
Do we know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Guilford does, too. I don't have a concession stand, I use movable trucks, and they have a RFP that goes out every year, and the highest bidder gets the job for the summer. That's one way of doing it, and then there's other ways of controlling the flexibility of bringing in variable, different foods. Food truck world has become a really big
Oh, yeah, no, it's.
deal, very, very good food, and it gives us flexibility.
Mark? There's one other option I'd like to point out, is just have a catering kitchen.
Catering kitchen, yeah.
That would have many of the same benefits as a food truck.
Yeah.
And it's a lot simpler than having a whole kitchen full of expensive staples.
Right, I agree.
Cooking gear.
I agree. But I think both. I think the catering would be for the community space and the community to enjoy and use it if necessary, but we would still service beachgoers.
I think, one example of the food truck thing, I haven't been there personally, but Two Roads is kind of interesting. You can actually go on the website, and they actually have a schedule day by day of what food truck will be at Two Roads.
No, I don't know Two Roads.
Two Roads is a brewery
Oh,
in
okay.
Stratford.
So, how reliable is that?
I think we'd have to do some homework on it and see.
Well, the owners are food area.
So we utilize, where I work, we utilize food trucks, and I would say there's a lot of times where they just don't show or something breaks
Well, I think,
down.
Neil actually has some firsthand experience since he actually built the building.
Yeah, at Two, I just asked Brian, because Brian was our project manager on that project, and the food truck, scheduling the food trucks is very reliable at Two Roads. So I
That's
would
because
think
they're
you
getting the
could plug in-
clientele.
Yeah,
That's right, they know they're gonna get that.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So maybe there's a way to plug into that list and see if they can
well, it's something to look into.
show up during the day.
Yeah, my quick comments, I like the idea of kind of working to attempt to kind of integrate the various elements of what we have at that beach. So, kind of the views, getting out over the water, kind of integrating whatever we're doing with the gazebo, providing a dining experience where people are not kind of limited to sitting in one particular area or on one particular surface. Diana raises a very important point. We should be very careful and circumspect about doing anything that's affecting the quality and the size of the existing beach. It's not a very big beach for us. Just a lot of things we've touched on. I think it's tremendously important, and I think we found a really good way to preserve the toilet facilities at ground level. And I think that's a very clever solution, and I think that's really, really, really important to us. I think whatever we do, I think we should attempt to do it in kind of the smallest and the least obtrusive footprint. Just recognizing kind of the sensitive nature of that particular beach and the kind of neighboring community as well. So, I think so far it's been just. I think you've done a great job of providing this kind of solutions you've provided up until now. Sir?
I'm done.
I'd like to circle back to Jim, give Jim an opportunity.
Sorry, we passed you.
Well, I think what everyone said is you're spot on. I think Diana had some really good points. I think the one thing we lost from anybody that plays paddle tennis like down at Wee Beach is we lost a lot of views. I mean, the way that building was designed, it could have been designed a little bit differently. So those that are using that room have better views. You don't have too many opportunities here. You have Wee Beach and you have Pear Tree. It would be a shame if we didn't use those views and you didn't build a facility that was really top notch. I think you guys are. I can understand. You want to keep the history of it. You want to keep the footprint of it to a minimum. But I think there's a lot of people that would like a facility that's with Wee Beach, it was really well received, I think, by a lot of people in town. And I think if we just take the footprint we have there and renovate some bathrooms and put some new toilets and sinks in, I think you're missing it. So I think you have a lot of good concepts there. I don't think we need a huge building. I think have a dining deck in Plan A. I think that's a huge. That would be really well received. And there are, Martha, to your point, there are a lot of times where people are trying to reserve the paddle building for off-season for parties, and we can't reserve it because it's for paddle functions. Mm-hmm. So, and there's a lot of times in the spring and summer, mostly in the summer, in the spring and the summer, where people are looking to reserve for birthday parties and family functions and class reunions and things like that, and it's already booked. So we have to turn them away. So to have some community space where people could use it for might even be a family reunion or a class reunion or something like that would be, I think, a nice opportunity. Does it have to be a huge facility? I mean, that's for you guys to decide. But I think there's a lot of good points to all of these plans, and I think you guys have a fun job ahead of you.
And I'll just end with, again, going back to Diana's point, I absolutely agree that if there's going to be a community space developed here, that it's got to have the views. My fear is that there are facilities that are built, and then by the time, even some of the people that would be naysaying it along the way, by the time it's built, and then people enjoy it, they wonder why it wasn't built big enough to host enough people to enjoy it. So they are going to be, in Darien right now, there is no opportunity to dine on the water. And this is the opportunity. It's really phenomenal. And I love pieces of this, but I do like, if you're going to do a community space, I think it needs to have all the windows to the water and the concession in the back. If the concession even stays, on the top floor. If not, that just goes to storage, and then removing the concession will opt to reduce the footprint a little bit. And that could maybe make the decision a little bit better on that. So.
And just a comment, I mean, I agree. I would like to enhance the experience at Pear Tree. However, I don't think, you go to the parking lot on weekends, and it's virtually always, almost, if not completely filled. So if people were having such a poor experience, I could see if our parking
don't get me
was
wrong.
underutilized.
I think you're mischaracterizing what I said. I'm not suggesting anybody's having a poor experience there. I'm suggesting, though, that as good as the experience is, it could be made better. And I think that's the charge of the commission.
But I would also encourage everybody to go back and look at the facilities, the master plan, the survey that was done, and what came up as priority items. Event space was not a high priority item. Improved restrooms were. Just have to look at these things. To me, and I can be convinced, but the flexible space is driving really a major part of this project. So I don't think until we've got a real feeling exactly how this is going to be used, what the concept is.
Sure. Well, we'll provide that for you.
I don't think we should move forward because, how can you draw?
Right, but to go back to the commission's point, it already is in the charge, so it should stay in the charge unless you go back to the.
I mean, my read of what Martha's asking for is more detail now.
Absolutely.
And to Jim's point, if there are, even to the extent you can quantify how often we're turning folks away that may want to kind of get into the paddle
Sure.
hut. And I think if you can do it seasonally, I think if you can kind of profile the types of activities that you see happening here. Because I think what Martha's saying is she's not understanding it clearly
Right,
enough. And I'm not
right.
sure we're articulating it clearly enough, or the commission's articulated it clearly enough.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Well, on that point, though, if we, like, you know, with the old saying, and I think Pam used it before, you build it, they will come. Having said that, we still only have 220 parking spaces. And on a nice day in September, when there's
Maybe
no,
get some lights.
you know, everybody can come, because they don't need a beach sticker. And you have booked this room for an event, let's say of 50 people, then we have a parking issue down there too. You know, I mean, we can't make the parking lot any bigger. So,
Certainly, there's lots of detail that have to come out. We
Right.
certainly can work on that for you. But I don't see this as a highly programmable building anytime in the summertime. You know, this would,
yeah.
right, it would be
Well,
a special place for the beachgoers to utilize the dining deck in
Right.
the summer, but you wouldn't be programming during high times, during beach season.
So can we agree, though, that you'll come back to us,
Sure,
right? I mean, that's an
absolutely.
important discussion, and we
Yes.
should, you know, that'll be on the agenda for the next meeting, and we'll have a good discussion around that.
Can I just ask you, what did you say the square footage of the paddle hut was,
I think it's 974.
974?
Don't mark my words, but I'm pretty
Oh,
sure.
no,
Do you
it's
remember
not.
that?
It's just under
1,000.
Yeah.
I checked that, yeah.
Okay, anybody else want to kind of weigh in here before we move to the next item on our agenda? Great. Fantastic, thank you guys for that. So you'll stick around though, because we'll have some, you may want to give some public comment. We want public comment.
Is that what's next on the
Yeah,
agenda?
yeah. Okay, so we're moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is public comment, and if I can just ask you guys to maybe just stand up. I'm sorry, Ron.
Mr. Chairman, can we have a short break before, I don't want to miss anything.
Sure, absolutely. We'll take 5. 5 to 7.
Run.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is public comment. I just asked that when you come up, if you could just state your stand, if you could stand, state your name, and just state the street address, the street that you're on, your full address.
Hi,
Hey, Jeff.
Jim Arrington, Pear 3 Point Road.
Yeah.
So, Martha referred to the town plan and where we were in terms of priorities, in terms of entertainment space, and in terms of bathroom. Both of those were actually at the very bottom of the list of citizens' priorities. What was at the top of citizens' priorities, by a very large margin, if you go back and look at the data, was the need to keep natural spaces and a sense of openness. What you're proposing here is to put a very out-of-scale building on a small beach, which is beloved. I don't think that you're doing the right thing in terms of the citizens of this town, because you want to destroy what you seek to promote. First, do no harm. It seems to me that an awful lot of this scheme, particularly in terms of the building, is driven by this event space. It's perfectly reasonable for people to want to have event space for people in Darien. Nobody is questioning that. What I do question is this particular small, tiny beach the right place to put it. Now you keep coming back to the paddle hut and saying, if we only had that right. Why aren't we looking to put the event space that you seek in Weed Beach and looking to reconstruct or reconfigure Weed Beach, which is 3 times the size of Pear Tree Point Beach and has none of the issues we're going through? In other words, you can protect Pear Tree Point Beach and you can have your event space. Just try not to put them in the same places, because your event space will destroy the character of a much beloved local beach. And you only have to go down to Rings End and look at the new building going up at Rings End Bridge and look at how high it is to see just how elevated these structures are and how intrusive they are and how much it can change the character of an area which is deeply beloved. So what I would first do before you go any further is I suggest that you put these drawings and proposals on the website as you go along to get input not only from me and people who live around, but the entire town. Take feedback from the entire city, the entire town of Darien. Don't just take it from a small group of people. You're more likely to get it right if you throw open the plans and ask people to comment as you go along. But, the concept of putting a 4,000 square foot plus structure, which is going to be 9 feet plus 9 feet with a 135 foot ramp, will destroy the character of this beach. You're destroying what you seek to promote, and that really doesn't make any sense. Let's look at another venue, another place, to put the event space you want, and that is Weed Beach, which can be sensibly reconfigured without putting it, without changing the nature of the beach in this way. In terms of the actual area itself, have we done a survey of parking spaces? How many parking spaces are needed? It seems to me that you're right, over a busy summer weekend, we need every parking space. But those parking spaces, 95% of the time, are actually pretty underutilized. How we look at traffic access down Pear Tree Point Road and parking spaces if we're going to increase the use of this beach, which is already pretty heavily used on the summer's day anyway. And finally, in terms of the burns, there was a lot of discussion on access for the elderly and disabled with these berms. There's also an area that people launch their boats, non-boat club members, just outside the boat club itself. How are they going to get through all these berms and obstacles, trying to launch their boats. And it seems to me that you're going to have a pretty large gap to allow that to happen. So, you know, what about non-boat club member access to the water? You know, can that be considered as well? So all I would say is, please put your plans online, get comments, and try not to think that there's a conflict between public access and enjoyment and preservation. It seems to me that we can do both, but maybe in different areas.
Thank you.
My name is Janine Hackett. I also live on Pear Tree Point Road. A couple of things. My priority in your project is saving our beach. At every high tide, every time there's a full moon, the beach is gone, the parking lot's completely underwater, right, including the road. So it's not the storms, it's not Sandy, it's constantly that our beach is washing away. My priority and my interest was in the beginning part of your presentation and how we're going to preserve the beach. We have a tiny beach. I love the idea of berms. We need berms, but you know, that's 8 additional feet of beach we're losing. Now we're putting ramps and elevated. High tide comes in, we have no beach left. And now we're adding buildings on top of this beach. Pear Tree Point Beach is the quiet beach that all the people come to, especially at night, 6 o'clock at night. It's filled with people, you know, couples, whatever, their wine bottles, they're not supposed to have them, but wine bottles, having dinner, you know, relaxing. It's a quiet, it's not the beach with the playground, with the paddle huts, with the tennis. It's a completely different vibe in that area. And it's something that's different, and different residents use our beaches for different reasons. They go to Weed Beach for one thing, they go to Pear Tree Point for another. And we need to respect those characteristics of what those beaches are and not completely change them. I mean, that's not the point of what we should be doing. I want to preserve the beach. One of the things I want to ask you in your dunes, are we putting rocks under the dunes? Let's go back to Sandy and look at Bayhead and Manalocan right next to each other. The ones that had the rocks in the dunes, those houses were there. The ones that didn't have the rocks, they were washed away. So could we really, really focus our attention on saving the beach? And what is the best plan? And can we have these walkways going to the beach? Can we have gates? Can we have it when storms are coming or high tide is coming, that we still don't wash away the dune and everything else? I mean, can we think longer and harder about preserving the beach instead of worrying about rental space? Because it's you know, in 10 years, we may not have a beach. And I think of the focus of this is saving the beach, and that should be the priority. And I think we have to be even more creative than we've been so far in how to protect the beach. Plants, dunes, you know, we're doing some dunes, but then we're stopping, so the water's going right around. Keep thinking. There's more to this than what we've done to this point. We have to really focus on preserving the beach. When we get to the second part, and I don't know, I've been trying to take notes and talk at the same time, we keep going back to the charge of the committee. We've been charged, this is the charge of the committee. I've been reading the charge of your committee, and I'd like to read it out loud. The Pear Tree Point Beach services many Darien residents and boaters. The recently completed master park plan recommended upgrades to Pear Tree Point Beach. The survey that we referred to, and thank you for referencing the survey. The lowest item on this survey is rental spaces. The second lowest lowest importance is special event spaces, rental spaces and special event spaces. Jim referred to what was the highest one, open space. Okay, that's what the town wanted. The town asked you in the summary of what they wanted. They wanted improved accessibility to park facilities. They wanted a parking lot upgrade. They wanted picnic area improvements. They wanted trees. They wanted the concession boathouse to be rehabilitated, replaced, or replace the outdated concession. Improved beach resiliency, boat ramp reconstruct, water fountain, outdoor showers, increase rental opportunities for umbrellas and chairs, not a wedding. Replace security guard shack, improve non-boat motorized boat storage. That's what the town wanted. That's what we asked for. No one in this town knows what you're doing. Every time I talk to someone and say, do you know what's going on? They're like, oh, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. They're never going to do that. I'm like, yeah, it's happening. It's happening. We keep saying, they're going to say, oh, there'll be plenty of time for public input. Plenty of time. You guys are steamrolling ahead. You are so far into this that no one knows what's going on. And it's so disturbing to me that looking at these plans, the focus has now become, oh, there's some people in town that can't afford to eat on the beach because they don't belong to a club. Go down to Pear Tree Point Beach. People are eating on the beach all the time. Every night. There's people bringing their dinner down there and they're sitting in the great Adirondack chairs. They're sitting in the little gazebo that you want to take down. They're sitting there eating dinner. Add a deck, ground level. Put more picnic benches, something more people can eat. Why are we building rental spaces? Why is that? Now we're getting rid of the concession stand and we're building a rental space for people to have parties.
May I? Look,
Yeah.
it's one of the prerogatives of us as co-chairs is we can set a time limit on
Okay,
comments.
that's fine.
I'm not setting a time limit.
No,
I'm just
okay.
asking you, you're
All right,
repeating a
I'm
lot of
sorry.
things that we
I know, my
understand.
husband tells me
I don't want to
that
be
all the time. I'm
disrespectful,
sorry.
but.
Okay. I will, but go back and read your charge. I've read it 10 times while I'm sitting in this meeting. It does not say rental spaces. It does not say party space, whatever you're calling it. It's like such a misnomer.
Flexible space.
Flexible, well, you keep saying program spaces. What programs? It's rental spaces. It doesn't even say program spaces in your charge for the Pear Tree Point.
It's on the list of objectives. Look, once again,
Okay,
just
I know I'm going
a quick
over.
comment, because you're asking the question, flexible programming space is on the list of objectives that was set by the commission. And that list of objectives is the input into this committee, and that's
Okay.
what's guiding this committee in terms of, the information that we're providing along to the design
Okay.
architects.
Well, on the town Parks and Rec committee, it has the Pear Tree Point Beach Building Committee charge. And it doesn't say anything about flexible spaces, so I'm just,
Yeah, but,
my interpretation, and maybe the town's
well,
interpretation
you
of
also
what they
referenced,
charge
and
you
once
with.
again, not to go back and forth,
Okay.
but you also referenced kind of the lack of understanding on the part of the town in terms of what's going on here.
Yeah,
I would just clarify, first of all, these are all public meetings. They're all televised on TV 79. This committee has been kind of was formed back in October. We're meeting on almost a bi-weekly basis. Many of your neighbors have been here with us.
I've been here in 90% of your meetings.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure, we could probably do more to help the town understand what we're doing. It's been publicized in the Darien Times, a number of our meetings and the outcome of our meetings. So I'm not sure.
What's been publicized is NIMBY, not in my backyard, which is really upsetting.
Anyway, I
But
think,
thank you for
yeah,
your time.
you're welcome.
But could I ask formally that these plans be put on your website?
There'll be a point at which we as a committee will make a determination that they're kind of mature enough and developed enough to put on the website, but not yet. No, we'll make that determination, and when we feel we're ready for that, we'll certainly get them out there, because to your point, Jim, we want the community to understand what we're up to, and before we actually publish.
Reputation for secrecy.
Well, I think that's being proliferated by maybe a few people who are not happy with what we're doing here, but there's certainly no intent of doing anything in secret. We've done everything as publicly as we possibly can. So, anyway, let's move on. Your name and just
Yes,
the road
my
name.
name is Scott Reardon, resident of Darien. I don't live on Pear Tree Point Beach, road. I'm over on Long Neck Point, and it doesn't affect my view at all. I go over to the beach, enjoy it, and come and leave, and so on, like everybody else in town. Where would I begin? In regard to the sort of the immediate topic that was bringing up about secrecy, here's what I find happening is that there are a lot of people that don't know what's going on. They're not expecting anything to be happening. They just don't know that these plans are being considered. And if they did, when they hear about it, there is some considerable surprise, and they're not connecting with what's being said here. And by the way, I don't belong to a club myself either. A couple observations. Have you considered doing some of these elements, the programming elements. Oh, but there's one other thing I'd say. The comments that have been made here by the group that's here, I would totally endorse. I think that they're articulate and they're right on point. I agree with the position, the statements that they made. And at the same time, I'd like good things to happen at this beach. And the site plan part of it, as opposed to the building, I think there'd be good support for that, generally speaking. Could you consider, and I address this really to you, Neil, but something that where you leave things on the ground floor rather than putting in a second floor? I know that creates some issues, clearly.
FEMA.
Right?
FEMA's gonna require.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into the sort of the elements of it, right now, and I know I'm broad brushing it, but I'm trying to be conscious of everyone's time and need for mercy.
And by the way, we have gone through the requirements that are guiding us at great length over the last 6 or 7 months. So there should be no misunderstanding in terms of the limitations that are placed upon us in terms of what can be where in terms of the site plan.
Yeah.
So I think we've been pretty transparent around it.
And maybe the thing to do is for several of us to get together, talk with Pam about more particular things, because for people to go through it without the benefit of necessarily being involved in a committee meeting and so on, it's hard. In fact, it's a little hard to hear right tonight as an example to some of the comments. Randy, I would like to have heard yours more clearly as an example. So, and by the way, Uber Eats, as well as about 5 other companies like them, they're spending $500 million a year deficit alone to get into the business that will compete with any concessions that are on a site like Pear Tree Point Beach. So, there are 15 restaurants that could deliver food. All you do is order it online, and if you're under 40, that's what people are doing. Kids, in my view, anybody under 40. So there's some shifting sands, no pun intended, that are going on in regard to the way people obtain food, eat, and so on and so forth. Uber Eats, okay? And they're trying to just increase their market share. The citizen survey, again...
Just to make the point, it's a great point, but they're also increasing traffic at the same time.
What are increasing traffic?
Well, if you've got somebody delivering food through Uber Eats from X number of restaurants in the course of a day, you've got additional traffic coming down Pear Tree Point Road, right? They've got to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding the point you're making.
Yes.
So
my point is, I think a concessionaire has new competition, and it's difficult for the concessionaire that's on site to make a business out of it themselves. That's my only point.
Oh, I thought you were recommending that we should look into the use of Uber Eats.
No, I wasn't suggesting that.
Okay.
I was just trying
Just
to
make sure
describe the
understanding the point you're
landscape in which we're trying to think, where will we be in 5 years or more? It's just in that sense. In regard to the citizens, survey, it seems to be what you all are doing seems to be disconnecting from that, and I don't understand why the focus isn't on preserving the views and the open spaces and the beach, environmental things. Instead, it's going a different direction. And so again, that's consistent with what other people are saying. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
I have other thoughts, but I'll leave it at that. It's scary.
Hi, Delise Bolton. I live on Pear Tree Point Road, right
Please
across from the
spell your last name for me, please.
Bollotin. So rather than reiterate what other people have said, I agree wholeheartedly with the comments about preserving this beach and the natural beauty of it. And I feel like somebody has said, build me a small beach cottage and you've built the Taj Mahal. That's what it feels like. I think that there are other options in town, specifically Weed Beach, Short Lane, other places where you could build a program room if that's what you think the town needs. I also don't really understand why a program room needs a catering kitchen. I mean, that's like, you're using this name program room, but it's really something else that you're creating there. And since there was so much mention of food trucks, I just want to say, since I live across the street, not really crazy about the idea of food trucks with their engines running all day and all the odors that will come from them throughout the day that they are parked at the beach. So I don't think that's a great option. But I do think that there are plenty of people who are still using the beach every day, especially the weekends. As you said, Ginny, into the evenings. I can see from my house, and there are always people on the beach in the evenings on a beautiful day. They have picnics, they barbecue, they bring food, their kids are playing, they're having an awesome time there. And I think that's the image that we want to retain, that that is what this beach is to these people and to the people of this town, and not building some huge monstrosity that every time you pull in or drive down the street or look out the window, it's like, oh my God, this giant building is here and now I can't see anything, any of the nature.
Thank you very much.
Bob Lyons, I live on Pear Tree Point Road.
Could you spell your last name?
Sure, Lyons.
It's the Lyons.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick things. One, thank you all for doing this. I know it's you do it because you want to do what's best for the town, and as do I. But two things are, as it relates to the program rooms or whatever we want to call it, I think you made a good comment as far as, could we see what the demand is? And what I would add to that analysis is, and why is Pear Tree Point the best place to satisfy that demand? So it's not just, there's demand, put it in Pear Tree Point, it's why is Pear Tree Point the best place, right? And I think that's important for your overall charter. And then the last thing I'd say is, I'd ask you is, you want to improve things, and I think improvement is good and change is good, but to keep the tenor of that beach and the authenticity of it and how unique it is in my mind, not being on the committee, so it's easy for me to say, is paramount to what you guys should be trying to achieve. So once again, thanks, and I'm sure whatever you do, Neil will do a great job in terms of designing something, but if you could take that away, that'd be important to me. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, Scott Reardon again. I'd like to ask one other thing. I think it's good to have sort of schematics horizontally, in addition to a bird's eye view, so you have an understanding of what this really does, what this really looks like. It changes.
I think Neil addressed that.
Oh, no. I'm talking about sort of the broader landscape of the yes, a facade, and I know you got to do the east, west, north, south. I get that, but I'm looking at more a broad schematic of what it looks like relative to the beach as a whole in its totality.
It would actually be great to see elevations of what's being proposed superimposed on an actual photograph of the beach.
And it's consistent with people's wanting to protect openness and so on. So it's sort of like a litmus test. Does it do that? And we don't know as a result of tonight's meeting whether it does or not, if you would.
So just to respond to that briefly, we share a lot of the concerns that you're all expressing now. We've been trying to get our hands around the building program, the site issues, and just to sort of organize everything. So it's a point that's premature, I think, to put on the website, to your point. We'd like to continue developing it with some of the feedback we're going to get from the committee, to a point where we can show you something that shows you what it's going to look like on the site, so you can see whether it's out of scale or not, and really judge it.
Before you came, what happened is that there was sort of a message that came to people that were concerned that, oh, where were you? Why are you coming to the party late? And my concern in light of your comment is that I'm going to be told again, oh, you came late, that where were you when the decisions were being made? It's almost like, oh, it's too early to decide. Well, excuse me, we already made that decision. And so, you've been around these kind of things before. And so I'm assuming what you presented tonight, we could put on the website. Maybe that's not the case, but I was looking at the horizontal as a separate element.
I'm gonna just take some liberties now, just, if there's no other, Scott, I appreciate it.
Excuse me, I'll stop.
No, look, Scott, we get the point. It's
Okay.
clearly articulated,
Okay,
we get it.
thank you.
Any other public comment at this stage? Okay, so what I'm just gonna ask for then, maybe, Neil, is just, maybe if you could just, you did a bit at the outset, maybe just spend a couple more moments, and if you could just kind of talk us through as a committee, and, for those of you who hear, you'll kind of get the benefit, is what you see as the process, because there have been some questions raised as to, when we might be at a certain point. I'm not looking for a precise time, but what we can expect to see in terms of artifacts coming out of the process. And, through those artifacts, what level of appreciation we'll have then for how this idea is developing. And I think, once again, this is just in keeping with the way I think we've managed the dialogue, certainly from the outset, but if you can just provide a little clarity. And I think that'll be helpful for us as we move off here and think about what you've shared with us this evening.
Sure.
That'll be great as well.
So typically in the design process, from this point forward, what we would do is we would take your comments on the plans. We would then go back for another round of design. We would likely have one chosen scheme and develop that scheme further, both in terms of floor plans and in terms of the elevations, the 3 dimensions of what it looks like. And then from there, we would get your comments again and then prepare either a 3D model of it that we could take in and turn around and see what it looks like on the site, or a physical model. And then you could really have an idea for what the scale is, how it relates to all the elements of the existing environment, and that sort of thing. I don't know that, I'd like to get Rob and Brian's comments as well, though, but I don't think that we're at a point where we can do that yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't think
There
so.
are too many questions about the program.
Yeah.
And so we really need to get some feedback from you. Is there going to be a concession or not? Is the program room sized properly or not? How much dining deck or outdoor deck area do you want? Those kinds of things are very important to the design from this point forward. So
Yep.
I think we really need that.
Appreciate that.
I think there's one more step before we can go back and really go through another iteration of the design.
What's your sense of the feedback you're getting at this, the quality of the feedback? Recognizing there's some pieces that are outstanding, but having had 2 sessions with the committee at this
Yeah.
stage.
I think it's pretty clear to me what the issues are. I've heard, all sides of the issue, so I know what the issues are. So now the question is, I think you all have to put your heads together and decide what's important and what's not.
Yep. Great.
And
What do you think?
I'd be happy to be part of that discussion.
Yeah, but you need to be part of that
But
conversation.
I think that should happen before we go back to the drawing board. You guys agree with that?
Seems like maybe that's probably the principal item on the agenda for the next meeting. Gives us a chance to kind of think through what we've seen, digest it, and then come back and have that conversation.
I think our tasks are to digest ourselves what we had here, write our own questions up, or get our own questions ready, and then talk amongst ourselves with Neil and whomever. But I think I would agree.
Yeah. Also, thank you for that, Neil. Yeah, I'll, at the risk of kind of speaking for the committee, but I'll certainly speak for myself here. I've greatly valued the feedback and the input that we've gotten from our neighbors. It's been great having you guys with us. I can tell you we've taken the comments that we've gotten and the input that we've gotten from the neighbors to heart. Hopefully you see some of that running as a thread throughout our conversations. Maybe we're not being as articulate or about it as we can be. The other thing I would just ask, I'm on TV 79 here, so I would ask anybody who's watching this, if you have friends and neighbors who have questions about what's going on here, certainly they can go back to the very first meeting that we've had on TV 79 and kind of catch up with everything that's happened here. Please invite them to the next meeting. We're providing, we haven't set any time limits in terms of public comment, and if somehow some of you think we're not working as hard as we possibly can be to be as transparent as we can be, that's just a misconception. I mean, our goal is to make sure that we're bringing the entire community along with us. So I would just ask you, especially you guys that are here, if you feel as though, those of you who made that comment, tell whoever is kind of sharing with you that they're not sure what's going on, tell them to come and see what's going on with us. Because it's very important for us to assure the community that this is happening as transparently as possible and with as much input as we could possibly get. So with that, I would just ask if there's anyone else, any other new business from any of the members of the...
Well, it's not new, but, well, sort of. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 19th. Is that a commission meeting also? Could we possibly change that so that if we were in a lot of discussions, we aren't rushed to go to the, to get out of this room and have a different room? And I know you're on the commission, but
Yeah.
maybe we could have it a different day, and then we wouldn't have to be in a rush to get out in 2 hours or whatever, and take our time and really go through this?
Yeah.
And how does everybody feel about
I
that?
absolutely agree.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of having as much, not having a hard stop for us. One thing we did for the last meeting, prior meetings, we started early. I realize that's kind of difficult for some folks. I mean, I don't know if that's an option, but
We still have the hard stop.
we have a hard stop.
Yeah.
I mean, we had 2 hours out of it,
Or
but we had a hard
we
stop.
just keep going,
Yeah, I mean, you'll lose Pam and Lori.
and maybe you have a soft start.
Or we do it on a different day?
Okay, so how about if we take that back? I'm not sure. I mean,
A
I'm open
different
to
day
it.
or
I
a
mean,
different room so that Park and Rec can meet at their appointed time and we can continue. with
Yeah,
the
it's a
different-
good point.
I can send everybody an email of any openings in terms of this room or another room that
Right.
is
So
available.
different-
That's like the big sway.
So we'll work with Pam
Yeah.
and we'll just circulate some thoughts on
Because
it.
I know
I
Mather
really-
Center has rooms usually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe,
Would there?
yeah, we'll figure it out.
I'd really like to have it on a different day so that we have you and Pam here.
Yeah,
I think it would be more beneficial.
Is there any day that's better than another? Because that's going to be hard to.
Yeah, I travel a lot, so I've already booked my calendar for this time frame.
so we want to try maybe 5:30 for the next meeting and see if that allows enough time. It seemed like, with 2 hours at our last
With
meeting.
3 hours
Well,
tonight.
I would suggest we start at 5:30 and hopefully be concluded. However, I would suggest
And if we
we do
don't,
it in a different room so that if we aren't wrapped up.
no,
or anything
I
continue-
would disagree with that because we can't lose Pam and we can't lose Mike. So
Well, I
either we
mean, I'm
start at
thinking
5 and go
stay.
to 7:15, and if we're not done, we continue to another meeting. But I don't think, having these two people walk out and go to a different meeting makes sense for the group, and, we're not gonna get anything done.
Well, I mean, we'll have a quorum, and I would
Are
hope maybe
you-
Mike could stay and miss
I'm
the
sorry?
Park and Rec
Free
meeting.
any day? Are you free any
No.
day?
I have the calendar already scheduled for these meetings in my, so I don't
So
travel.
why don't we stick with?
But I mean, are you free like on the 7th?
5:30 start for the next meeting?
I have to look at my
So
calendar.
I think that's a great idea because Mike can stay and I can go and attend the commission meeting.
Yeah, so can we say that, can I make a suggestion? We'll start at 5:30 for those who can.
In a
Join us.
different room?
In a different room,
Yeah.
and we'll go for as long as we need to, and I'll stay and I'll miss the Park and Rec meeting, if it's necessary. Yeah, but that's a great suggestion. Appreciate you.
So keep it the 19th at 5:30?
Yes, yeah.
Well, it'll become a special meeting.
Right.
Yeah, we'll have to find another room then. And we'll have to arrange that with TV 79 as well.
Why is it a special
And
meeting?
we changed the
It's on the calendar. It's already on the calendar.
I think it does.
I checked that.
I will check.
It does.
Because the last time we made, at 5:30, it became a special meeting.
Okay.
And I changed the room. I don't know.
I will check.
Okay.
It was like short notice.
Yeah.
The,
And
only,
the-
the other thing I just wanted to ask, the amount of space, the least amount of space on these drawings was 1,300 square feet for your program room. I was down at Weed Beach the other day and I was looking around at the paddle hut. What if you put an addition onto that paddle hut? Would that, I don't know how many 1,300 square feet is, is it half of this room? Would it need to be that big? If you expanded the paddle hut, would that maybe suffice for all your needs that you need down
Well,
there?
I think what's got people shook up is that they're adding the word programming space when in essence, granted, call it whatever you want, it was a flexible community space that was agreed upon.
Right.
And that flexible community space, in my opinion, I believe the commission shared that, was that this particular space at Pear Tree, that the community would like to enjoy it. And how do we allow them to enjoy this space? And then with that in mind, Jim and I, with the department's needs, also need space, which then became, well, certainly on an off-season, we would use this space when we needed it in terms of programming. But I look at it very much so as a space for the community to enjoy in many different facets. So whether it's 2,000 square feet or it's 1,000 square feet or it's whatever it may be, it's our decision to help guide Neil and his crew to design something to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's at the heart of the conversation.
Sure.
That space, the size of it, what we're using it for.
It absolutely is.
Being in a position to justify, that decision when the time comes.
It's hard to nail down a Parks and Recreation department to its exact needs. What we're supposed to be doing is increasing things for the public to do. That's our job. It's creative. And we're always coming up with different things and creating new programs and filling gaps in all different age groups. That's what we do. We thrive on it. We want to create new programs and new things for people to do.
I think
To
one
me,
thing.
there's a difference between programming and event space, though. I mean, providing event space for birthdays, I don't know. And I keep thinking of the Mather Center. Now, granted, it doesn't have views, but if any of you have ever walked into the lobby of the Mather Center, it's very spacious. It has a fireplace. It has a big counter across the back that could be used as a bar area. There's an adjacent cafeteria with a full-scale commercial kitchen.
That's the senior
If
center.
you're out of space, that would be a great rental space at various points and times for events. Granted, it doesn't have a view.
Yeah. Can I just say, I mean, we are.
I'm just throwing that out.
No, it's a great point. My only point is, we are talking, I mean, I think Pam understands that she has to do some work to justify, maybe not the fact that it's programmable space or whatever label we want to put, the size of it and what the requirements are for that space. And I think you're making a good point. It's a compelling point. There's space in other locations, maybe there are other opportunities. I don't think that's for us. I think it's for us to kind of. I mean, we can discuss it all night. I'm not sure we can. We're going to go.
As a thought.
But I think it is something that we. I think it's something that we need to bring back and update the commission on as well. At some point. So that's a separate item, right? So appreciate it. I certainly get the message. So with that, anyone have anything else they'd like to bring to the table? Mark?
Yep.
Okay.
Dinner.
Motion to adjourn. Seconded. Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Jim, thank you.
Off the record, thank you for your
Didn't
service.
contribute much, but no worries.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Scott.